Good evening. We will go ahead and play a little bit of music to get the show started, and anybody tuning in early will be able to hear it and connect a little bit better with the show, I hope. Going to play a little Brick Fields, a blues artist out of Arkansas. She's awesome. And then we'll get Mike on and talk away about tonight's subject, Wiccan, Witchcraft, and all the pros and cons and all of that fun stuff. We start out with our opening.
It's Wednesday evening. You're listening to Mystic Moon Cafe with Wendy Schindler and Travis Short. Every week we will interview guests that are experts in various fields of the supernatural, paranormal, unexplained, and esoteric. So sit back and let us take you on a journey to educate, enlighten, and entertain as we broaden your horizons. Now, here's your hosts, Wendy Schindler and Travis Short. You're listening to Mystic Moon Cafe. The views and opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, the network, or our sponsors.
Ain't got the change of a nickel. Ain't got no bounce in my shoes. Ain't got no fancy to tickle. I ain't got nothing but the blues. Ain't got no coffee that's perkin'. Ain't got no winnings to lose. Ain't got a dream.
Hello.
That is working.
Can you hear me?
I ain't got nothing but the blues. When trumpets flare up, I keep my head up. I just can't make it come down. Believe me, Peppy, I can't get happy since my ever-loving baby left town. Ain't got no rest in my slumbers. Ain't got no feelings to bruise. Ain't got no telephone number. I ain't got nothing but the blues. When trumpets flare up, I keep my head up. I just can't make it come down. Believe me, Peppy, I can't get happy since my ever-loving baby left town. Ain't got no change of a nickel. Ain't got no bounce in my shoes. Ain't got no fancy to tickle. I ain't got nothing but the blues. I broke it down on the ways to Jordan. All on the dusty shoulder, Lord, I have fallen. Though I roll down this earthly river, I do not roll alone. I do not roll alone. I am a part of the fear that's hated by the ways of the world, by the heavy weighted. Still I roll down this earthly river. I do not roll alone. I do not roll alone. Though the skies, sometimes the rain is a-falling. Although the tears and the fears and the darkness calling, heaven awaits for the love of the faithful, for the heart of the living that's embraced by the grateful. Oh, I know my Lord, He sees me. Despair, I know He will not leave me. Though I roll down this earthly river, I do not roll alone. I do not roll alone. Sometimes the rain is falling, though the tears and the fears and the darkness comes calling. Heaven waits for the love of the faithful, for the heart of the living that's embraced by the grateful. I know my Lord, He sees me. Even in deep despair, I know He will not leave me. Though I roll down this earthly river, I do not roll alone. I do not roll alone. I do not roll alone.
And good evening, everybody. It's me, Wendy. Travis will be joining us shortly. I've got Mike on the line with me, and we'll go ahead and open up the show, play a little Deep Purple for as per Mike's request, and get right back with you. There we go. Open, not close.
It's Wednesday evening. You're listening to Mystic Moon Cafe with Wendy Schindler and Travis Short. Every week we will interview guests that are experts in various fields of the supernatural, paranormal, unexplained, and esoteric. So sit back and let us take you on a journey to educate, enlighten, and entertain as we broaden your horizons. Now, here's your hosts, Wendy Schindler and Travis Short.
Hang on just one more second. I can't find... I've got Lady in Black by Uriah Heep, Music Lady, that Mike had an actual hand in. Deep Purple is not showing up. Listen. Oh, there it is. Here we go. Listen, learn, read on.
In ages past, when spells were cast in a time of men and steel, where a man was taught no special thing, it was all done by feel. So listen, so learn, so read on. You gotta turn the page, read the book, it's hear the song of lovely Joan, her sound so sweet and clear. In the courtroom of the king, among Judah and the peers. So listen, so learn, so read on. You gotta turn the page, read the book, and listen. Now hear the words of Talisman on the foaming beach of the ocean. In the day of trouble, I shall be of more service to thee than 300 salmon. The hair bounds across the page, past castles white and fair, to dreaming chessmen on their boards with a fool's mate as a snare. So listen, so learn, so read on. You gotta turn the page, read the book, and listen. Three times I have been born. I know through meditation. The birdie flies the distance from pages 2 to 6. Past minstrels in their boxes to the water of the Styx. So listen, so learn, so read on. You gotta turn the page, read the book, and listen. Don't take the pictures lightly. Listen to their sound. For from their colored feeling, experience is found. So listen, so learn, so read on. You gotta turn the page, read the book, and listen. All the sciences of the world are collected in my breast, for I know what has been, what is now, and what hereafter will occur.
All right, and that was Listen, Learn, Read On by Deep Purple, suggested by Mike so that we could have some of his music on this evening. We'll let him explain more when we bring him on here in just a moment. I thought I'd do a quick introduction for those who aren't familiar with Mike Nichols. Let's see. We welcome back Mike Nichols, author of the Witches Sabbats, to talk about how witchcraft, or Wicca, has changed over the years since its revival in the 1960s, the difference between traditional and eclectic covens, the pros and cons of solitary practice versus coven work, and so much more, because you know how we follow the proverbial rabbit down the rabbit hole. Now, Mike is the celebrated author of the Witches Sabbats book, and www.witchessabbats.com, is a contributing author to creating circles and ceremonies and staff editor for the Center Spiral, Kansas City's online quarterly pagan journal. Mike has been a featured speaker on National Public Radio, NPR, Spiral Dance Radio, and Eclectic Pagan Podcast on iTunes. He does extensive online teaching and writing, occasionally guest lectures at pagan festivals, and is a singer-songwriter who performed with the pagan band Spellbound. And if I can get back to this, I will. Good evening, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Wendy. It's great to be back.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on again.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know if I can live up to that intro, but I'll do my best. I got to tell you, I am much more relaxed this time, I think, because we've done this once before.
Sure.
And also, I didn't know the protocol for your show before, but, the last time I was on, which was around, Thanksgiving, I think?
I believe so.
Travis mentioned that it was like one bottle of wine per hour. I don't think I'm going to be able to keep up with that, but I'm a lightweight when it comes to that.
Well,
but
so
am
I, but yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I was going to have absinthe to drink tonight, but my friend Alexia and I polished off that bottle last night, so I went out and got some mead today instead.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about mead last time when I was on, and its connection to honeymoon and all of that stuff, so, yeah.
I always see all of those, they have such clever names and creative advertising for all of the heavier meads, ales, beers, and things, and I've got to keep it lightweight for my own palate.
Yes, and it was really strange. When I first started teaching witchcraft classes back in the 1970s, I would often mention that mead was a traditional drink for covens, British covens in particular, and I would ask the class, my students, how many people here have ever tasted mead before, and not a hand would go up. And, of course, that was like in 1970.
Okay.
But, of course, things have changed a lot since then, and we'll be talking about those changes. But oddly enough, footnote, since I had never tasted mead when I first started teaching, I decided to make mead. And, of course, now everybody's doing that. But in 1970, I was like the first person that I knew that had ever tried to make mead. And I was a student down at the University of Missouri at Columbia. And there was this little winemaking shop outside of the city limits. And I went out there and talked to the guy. And he was there for all the people who made grape wine, because Missouri has a lot of great wineries around, and he would help with that with people. And I told him I wanted to make mead, and so it was really strange. He knew what it was, but he really wasn't familiar with it, and he certainly didn't have any books on mead making. So we had to send to England to get a book on how to make mead, and I think I took maybe 2 months to make the transatlantic crossing, and I was waiting breathlessly for this book to get here. And with typical beginner's luck, it turned out absolutely fantastic. And people who knew me then still talk about that first batch of mead that I made. So, yeah, and it was a straight honey mead. Yeah, it wasn't a mellow or a metheglin or any of the combos. It was a straight honey mead. And, for anybody who is already into winemaking, and would like to try their hand at mead making, it's really a lot simpler, because you don't have to deal with crushing up the grapes or the must or straining any of that stuff. It's just dissolving the honey in the water and then setting some yeast on it. And please, not baker's yeast, but, go to a wine shop and get a good champagne yeast, and that's going to make your best tasting mead. And then, first get a book on winemaking in general to know the steps, but then you can make a really good mead. So, I encourage people to try it out. And we're lucky here in Kansas City, because we've got up in just north of Kansas City in Weston, Missouri, there is a wonderful meadery called Pirtles. And they make several different kinds of meads that are all really great. So I'm having mead tonight.
Fantastic. Cheers.
End of footnote.
Yeah.
I'm stealing this from Eddie Izzard, by the way. It really works great for me because I have all these digressions that I normally do. So.
Oh, that's great. We
Anyway.
pick up and imitate those that we like and seem apropos.
Exactly.
Well, everybody, Travis will be joining us shortly. He got tied up with some work stuff, and of course the boss calls and needs him halfway across the state of Kentucky. So as soon as he gets into wherever he's staying and online, we will bring him on as well.
Oh, that's great. Is he suffering the cold the way we are here in Kansas City, or?
That's what he says, yes.
Okay.
And the cold, the snow, the ice, it's pretty bad out that way as well. I guess right on the Kentucky-Virginia border.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's supposed to get a little warmer here come this weekend, I think, so that'll be great.
Absolutely, yeah. And then I was looking at it earlier today. I don't know if they're still calling for it, but there's like 100% chance of thunderstorms on Sunday.
Yeah, don't you love it when this is Missouri, folks? You know,
Yes.
like it'll be snowing and thundering at the same time. Great stuff. If you like weather, and I'm a weather junkie, you know, I love this stuff. So this is the greatest place to be for weird changes in weather. We had like a close to 50-degree temperature swing within 24 hours a couple of days back.
We're
That's
very
amazing.
close to that, yes.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of meteorologists that are on the coast, you know, they're like, oh, you know, yeah, we're having weather. It'll be the same for the next week. No changes expected. And they, you know, if they're craving some excitement, they all want to come to the Midwest because, you know, nothing stays the same more than a few hours and it's different. So.
Exactly, yes. Although those who have weather shoulders and other arthritic joints we don't fare so well, but it's still good. It's still exciting. Part of
I
aging,
know, and
right?
I feel I'm lucky. I don't have those things, and I drive people crazy because everybody else is complaining about the cold, and you know I'm like the little kid in me still is like, oh, it's snowing!
Yay!
Yay!
Now, have you ever
Snow
seen
day.
the? I forget. It may have been a Pinterest posting, but you make the snowman with glow sticks for eyes.
Oh, nice.
Oh yeah, right. We didn't get quite enough snow to do it, but I am so looking forward to if and when we do. Yeah.
Yeah. I think maybe red glow sticks so that it'll look kind of demonic or something.
Oh, absolutely. We'll freak all of those people out.
Yeah. As if I don't freak my neighbors out enough as it is, but you know.
You know, we've all got something. I've got ginormous German shepherds here to scare the passersby, so it works.
They can't complain about us because look at the Country Club Plaza here in the Kansas City. Every Easter they trot out those bunnies with the glowing red eyes.
Oh, I
and
remember. Those
just
things are terrifying.
creepy.
Yeah. Now, what was the movie with the demonic rabbit?
Oh, Donnie Darko.
There we go. Mm-hmm.
Brilliant film. Oh my God, I love that film.
It was a creepy son of a gun. Now, Travis can talk to you about all of the specifics of it. I just remember, holy crap, you know?
Yeah, that was Jake Gyllenhaal. Was the star in that, and he did a brilliant job. And I always, you know, for Easter, there's like two movies that I have movies for each one of the holidays, and of course, Groundhog's Day coming up. We've got the Bill Murray movie, Groundhog Day. But for Easter, there's always Jimmy Stewart's, you know, Harvey, which is a brilliant film. Or if you want to go to the dark side, you can do Donnie Darko.
Right. Or just do both, you know, for the fun of it.
Exactly. Double feature.
Oh, Samantha, what did you miss? We're talking about movies at this point. Travis joining us soon.
Yes, we're not on topic at all, but
not
we're having
even
fun.
Remotely yet. Mike is generously filling in for Travis's usual and my usual, you know, opening BS session.
Banter.
Yes, banter, exactly. Donnie Darko.
Yes, Donnie Darko, she says, yes. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Brilliant movie.
Completely, yes. Now, don't have anybody lined up for next week yet, but never fear. I will come up with something brilliant, someone brilliant, and let everybody know.
You had an exorcist last week, is that right?
Well, that's Bill Bean, and
okay.
He doesn't really tout himself as an exorcist, but it's a deliverance for whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. Bill was a little off topic as well, and I worry about Bill. He's taking a lot of things at face value and not looking any deeper, and it's I think maybe he's under too much stress.
Yep, and there's a lot of stuff out there. More things than are dreamed of in our philosophies. Horatio.
Yes. But when he starts going off on the Hollywood group and saying, that they're cannibals, and he's believing whatever sites he goes to,
the conspiracy theory sites.
Right,
yeah, those are fun. I enjoy them. They're
fun.
very
Yes.
They're entertaining.
Cannibalism, not so much, but okay.
Right.
We all have our thing.
You heard about the cannibals that put a clown in the cauldron, right, to eat?
No,
one of them says to the other, "Does this taste funny to you?" Sorry.
I remember that one. That one's almost as old as I am. Yes.
I know. Okay.
But it's still cute.
Yeah. Anywho.
I'm sorry, I was reading the chat notes real quick.
Okay.
I apologize for my nose. It was my humidifier had run out of water while I was gone today, and so now, of course, my nose wants to stop up. It'll be okay.
Good.
Yep.
Now, this weather is hard on people's sinuses.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, finding that perfect balance where you can breathe is challenging.
It is. So, we opened up with Deep Purple. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Which was, I sent that track to you earlier, and the reason I did is because it mentions a couple of the Welsh traditionalist characters that are in the Welsh myths. It mentions, it's from their album, The Book of Taliesin. So that was the first lineup of Deep Purple, and which was my favorite, actually. It had, of course, featured Ritchie Blackmore and John Lord, and also Nicky Semper, and who was on drums? Ian, I'll have to look that up. It escapes me at the moment.
Happens.
I know. It's been too long since I've been a DJ, but what a group they were. And they often did songs about magic and really interesting stuff. Like, you can tell they're drawing from the Book of Taliesin in the album by the same name. And that opening thing is called Listen, Learn, Read On. And it's all about encouraging people to read from the Book of Taliesin, which is one of the great Welsh epics that was originally tagged on to the Mabinogion in the version that was published, probably the most classic version done by Lady Charlotte Guest. And it had the 4 branches of the Mabinogi proper, plus a lot of other Welsh stories tacked onto it, including the Book of Taliesin. So. And Deep Purple is a great group. So. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Well, yeah. I mean, you had mentioned the Taliesin Book of Taliesin, and then I saw when I was looking it up to kind of look into it a little further, that was on their cover, and I thought, I wonder how that all ties together.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. That's it. Yep. I thought that would be an appropriate thing to kick off the show, because since we're going to be talking about my tradition of witchcraft, which is Welsh a little bit, and as a means of contrasting that to more eclectic approaches to witchcraft that's being practiced today. So things have changed a lot.
Well, are you talking like since the 14 and 1500s, or 30 or 40 years ago?
That's a good point, and I'm glad you raised it. I think things have changed a lot since the 1400s.
Yes.
People argue a lot about how old witchcraft really is. And when I use the word witchcraft, I also will use the word Wicca interchangeably with that, because when I first got into this in the 1960s, that was what was understood. Wicca, what we call Wicca, was the original form of today's word witch, and it's an Old English or Saxon word, originally pronounced witcha, oddly enough, W-I-C-C-A. Well, I don't know how pedantic to get here for your listeners. I don't know how much
I'm interested. So
into linguistics,
right.
But yeah, the first known occurrence of the word witcha, or which was spelled W-I-C-C-A, was in the law codes of Alfred the Great around 890 CE, Christian era or Common Era. And Alfred, who was the king of the Saxons, was using that word to describe the pre-Christian people that he was trying to convert to Christianity, because he was a Christian king, and he was, as is typical of the Christian religion, he was proselytizing. He was trying to convert people to Christianity, which to him was the one true, only faith. And so the people who resisted that, who clung to the old pagan ways of the countryside, the people who lived, actually the word pagan is Latin, comes from the Latin pagani, which means country dweller, because Christianity, when it first started catching on, caught on in the cities first. And so he was trying to convert these people who lived out on the heath, the heathens, he was trying to convert them to Christianity. But his name for those who resisted that was Wicca, or which today we call Wicca. But it's actually the same word. The Saxon word W-I-C-C-A is a male singular noun. And the feminine version, or the female version, feminine actually version, was W-I-C-C-E, Wicca, or Witcha. And it was essentially the same word. And as Old English moved into modern English, they dropped those gender endings. So instead of witcha and witcha, it became just simply witch. And unfortunately, when Gerald Gardner revived not only the practice of witches, but he also revived the word W-I-C-C-A, but he misspelled it in his writings. I shouldn't say misspelled it, because it was not standard orthography at that point. So he spelled it W-I-C-A, and people began pronouncing it Wicca. And it obscured the fact that it's actually the same word as witch. And I actually wrote a whole essay on this, which can be found on my website, witchessabbats.com. And the name of the essay is "A Witch by Any Other Name," and it goes into all this, etymology. But another thing is that the word that most pagans today pronounce Wiccan and use as an adjective, they'll say this is a Wiccan ceremony, or whatever, was not originally an adjective, but was a plural noun. And so you would have one Wicca, two Wiccan. And that an or en plural ending is not unknown even today. I mean, it's rare, because we usually make our nouns plural by adding s or es.
Right. But
we also have examples like child, children, ox, oxen, Wicca, Wiccan. So
makes sense.
Yeah. So to me, when I was first getting into this, and a lot of the rest of us who were part of the old guard, grew up thinking that Wicca and witch meant the same thing. And I still tend to use those two words interchangeably. And that throws a lot of people, because now there's this tendency to say, oh no, these are two separate things. if you practice Wicca, you're practicing a religion. If you're practicing witchcraft, you're practicing not a religious philosophy necessarily, but just doing magic. And that distinction has always been problematic for me, I think is the word, because whenever you try to draw a strong line between religion on the one hand and magic on the other, you set up this kind of false dichotomy where people think that if you do anything magic to help yourself in the real world, that is somehow at odds with a spiritual approach to life. And one thing that witchcraft, I think, in terms of the philosophy, is very strong on is the fact that the material world, the real world, interpenetrates the spiritual. And you can't meaningfully separate those two things. And so I continue to say that I'm a witch and a Wiccan. And it confuses a lot of people, but that's the way I'm going to be.
Well, I understood it, but yeah, a lot of people don't. And the ones that confuse me a little bit more are the Christian pagan witches. It seems like you've got oxymorons going on, but possibly not.
Yeah, isn't oxymoron used? Is that a cleaning solution for? No. I won't
that
go
too,
there.
Right?
Right. No, to me there are, and I want to say this with all charity and compassion, but to me there are elements within Christianity that are mutually exclusive to elements within witchcraft. Specifically, if you have, and of course most of us did, most of us grew up in a Christian household or were raised Christian. Well, I can't say
Catholic,
most of us
yeah.
today, but a lot of people. Travis, right? He used to be a minister, right? Or
yes,
something.
Southern Baptist, I believe it was.
Yes, he would be able to interject it in here, I think. But one of the important things about Christianity is the belief that 2,000 years ago, the one right and only true God sent his son, sent this man born into the physical world to come here to save us from our original sin, which, as I mentioned on the last show I was on, I don't remember doing that original sin, and I don't think it was very original. Anyway, and I have a problem with that. I don't buy the main axiom, the main, I guess, theoretical part of that. I don't believe that human beings are born broken and need to be fixed. And even if they were, I don't think that fixing should come from somebody sending a guy, and it's always a guy, 2,000 years ago to fix us all forever. It just, the theology of it, or to be more precise, the Christology of it for the Christian religion, did not make sense to me. And I can't imagine how it could make sense to any Wiccan or witch. So, I mean, yes, I understand that historically a lot of witches were forced into, quote, converting to Christianity. They were forced.
Face horrible deaths and tortures.
Yeah, that they were. Yeah, it was either convert or you die at my sword point.
Right.
There's a famous historical incident. I think this was in France. I may be wrong, but where the church militant, I can't remember if it might have been the Jesuits or the Dominicans, but they swept through this one pagan town, and the commander in charge said, "Kill everybody here." And his lieutenant said, "But sir, I know that some of the people in this town have converted to Christianity." And his commander's reply was, "Kill them all. God will know his own."
Oh, Lordy. University. That's kill them all, let God sort them out. There you go.
Exactly. And and even in much later times, there was the tradition that, witches would put on this pretense of being Christian. They would go to a Christian church on Sunday. They had their own little rituals, like they would typically, and most Christian churches are laid out architecturally in an east-west orientation, and that was because of the rising sun, and Jesus was the rising God and all that stuff. So witches tend to give the north direction primacy in a lot of cases, especially Celtic and especially Welsh. And so when you would have a typical cruciform church in architectural form, the witches would gather after Sunday Mass at the north door of the church. And that was kind of their way of saying, oh, here we are. And the rest of them didn't know it until the church fathers started realizing what was going on. And they started bricking up the north entrance to a lot of churches.
Oh, wow.
So even today, all throughout England and Europe, you'll see the north door of the transept bricked off, because they knew that that's where the pagans would gather, and that was kind of a secret, sign among them. So they stayed in they stayed in the broom closet because it was dangerous for anybody to know that there were witches still practicing. Okay. But I don't think they ever accepted the theology of Christianity to the point where they really believed that this guy 2,000 years ago had come to save their souls, because from the witchcraft point of view, we don't have souls that need saving. So I'm getting pretty deep pretty early in the show, aren't I? Sorry.
No, not at all. I'm enjoying it. I know the girls are. Ladies. Queen Alexia's followers.
Oh, good. And she's queen of what? I missed that.
Well, I think the world. I believe that was queen of the world.
Oh, queen of the world. Okay.
Yes.
I think I did vote for her for that. So.
I joined the bandwagon too. I figured, why not?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Now, just because my head works this way, and I have no idea why, Scottish, like the Scottish legends, not legends, but didn't they have just a huge and massive purging that was, basically heard throughout the world?
Purging of
witches, theoretical witches, anyway.
Yes, absolutely. The witchcraft persecution in Scotland was terrible, as it was in Germany. There were legends of, it's very interesting as to how many people, the thoughts of historians about how many people were actually killed for the crime of witchcraft. And it's difficult. That's a difficult subject, because when I was starting out, the most common figure that was thrown about was 9 million were killed for witchcraft over a period of about 3 centuries. That's a long time. But modern historians have walked that back, saying, no, the numbers couldn't have been that high. Yet there are some historians today who think it might possibly have been that high. If you kind of read between the lines, there's a tendency for a lot of modern academic historians to see as valid only those things which were written down. And this drives me crazy. Yeah. But, that is the way academic history is done today. And if it wasn't written down, then it didn't happen. So they can't find actual records of 9 million people being put to death for witchcraft. Therefore, it didn't happen. Therefore, the only the only people who were put to death for witchcraft were the ones that were actually written down. Now, stop and think about this for a second. Bring some common sense to this. If the only thing that ever happened to you in your life were just the things that have been written down, how much has ever happened to you?
Pretty much nothing.
Nothing, exactly. So, to me, the best historians are the ones that learn to extrapolate from known data. And they'll look at the trial records and say, oh yeah, this person and this person is said right here in the logs of the court were executed for witchcraft. But for every one of them that were written down, there might be X number that were not written down. And if we look at how many people were executed perhaps in a single day, in a single town, in Germany, as many as 900 in one case, where there were contemporary eyewitness accounts of how there were so many people burnt at the stake that there was literally, and I'm going to disgust everybody, but there was literally human flesh that had melted and was flowing down the streets.
Oh.
And yeah. Mm-hmm. And again, if you extrapolate from those things, you can see where maybe as many as 9 million people were executed for witchcraft over the course of 3 centuries. Not all who were killed were probably witches. There were probably a lot of people who did not follow the old religion who were also accused and accused of witchcraft and killed for it. But that doesn't make... And, anyway, it doesn't really make any difference what the number is, does it? Because if even just a few were killed for following the old gods and old goddesses of pre-Christian Europe, that's too many.
Yes.
So that's what we always have, and I always kind of make this point when I'm talking about religions that are monotheistic. They have this tendency to fall into this trap of intolerance. And it's almost as though the intolerance is built into the system. Because if there is only one God, I mean, if that's a given, that's an axiom. You start from there. Then the very next thing you're saying is, well, he's my God. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense to allow the universe to have only one God and let it be somebody else's. So you start by saying there's only one true right God, and it's always a God, never a goddess, and that God belongs to me. So if somebody else is worshiping a different god or goddess, then by definition, they are worshiping a false god. Since there's only one, and you have him,
right, then
they are worshiping a false god. Now, what are you going to do about it? There's only 2 possible answers. Either you convert them to the one right, true, and only God, and they come into the fold, or you consider them an enemy of the one right, true, and only God, and that gives you an excuse to get rid of them.
Right, eradication.
So, eradication, yeah. So, I kind of... It's a difficult proposition. I know people who are monotheistic who are very good people. And yet, they are often faced with this challenge of, well, my friend over here doesn't believe in the same God I do, so, what's going to happen to them? I'm going to try to convert them. And often they see this as an act of love. They don't want you to go to hell, what they think of as hell.
Right.
So they try to bring you back into their fold. And they consider it an act of kindness to do this. But, it's a little bit problematic for those of us who would rather be left alone and left to worship the gods and goddesses that we prefer, or the gods and goddesses perhaps of our ancestors, our distant ancestors. So yeah, I've always thought that monotheisms have that kind of intolerance built into the system. So anyway, long tangent.
Not at all, very informative. Now, it was my understanding that the word witch came from actually the wise people of the village. The natural herbalists who cured a lot of things, but the church saw them as, I don't know, adversaries, but as a threat to them and their power, basically. And
right.
basically that's where "suffer not a witch to live," or however that was exactly said. I forget these days.
Yes. Which was a mistranslation as well. It was originally "thou shalt not suffer a poisoner to live," but when... Oh yeah, and that occurs in the King James version of the Bible, and that was James the First of England, who was originally James the Sixth of Scotland, who was obsessed with witches. So it was not surprising that he had the translators of the King James version of the Bible translate that passage as "thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." In fact, he was so obsessed with witches that he actually wrote a book about witchcraft and demonology. And so, yeah, and you were right what you started to say earlier about, a lot of people did see witch and as being somehow related to the idea of the wise woman, because usually every village had, out at the, just outside the village, there was some woman who was the town herbalist, the town midwife, the town, whatever. And she was often called a wise woman. But at the same time, she was often called a witch. And even though those two words are not etymologically connected, they are certainly theoretically connected, because and to prove that point, there was a guy who wrote a book. His name was Reginald Scott, and he wrote a book called The Discovery of Witchcraft, which was published in 1584. And his exact quote was, and I'm reading this from one of my essays, he says, "At this day, it is indifferent to say in the English tongue, she is a witch or she is a wise woman." Now, that was published in 1584. So that shows you how far back this connection of witchcraft and wisdom or wise woman or wise man, which was usually called a wizard, how far back that goes. And I wrote, I'm always referring to these essays that I write, but in that same essay called A Witch by Any Other Name, I deal with the fact that a lot of people thought that Gerald Gardner was the first to kind of reintroduce the word Wicca into modern English, but it never really left. If you look at, for example, Professor J.R. Tolkien, who wrote The Lord of the Rings, he uses the word Wicca when he used that word when he was drafting The Two Towers, because he had that word, written in the margins by a scene that dealt with Gandalf and Saruman, who were otherwise, throughout the trilogy, known as wizards.
Right.
But he wrote the word Wicca in the margin. That was never published, but Christopher Tolkien noticed that in a footnote of his 12-volume History of Middle-earth, and I think that was in the volume that dealt with the writers of Rohan and so forth. And that was and Tolkien was drafting that The Two Towers in 1942. That was a full decade before Gerald Gardner had published anything about Wicca. Now let that sink in for a second. So the word Wicca had never really gone away. I mean, it had gone away in the sense that it had been replaced by the common usage of the word witch, but it was still known as Wicca. And Tolkien was very right to understand that and Tolkien, by the way, gave the more correct or more common spelling of Wicca, which the Saxon CC was pronounced as TCH. So that's why we get the word Wicca or witch from the word Wicca or Wicca.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very thorough research.
Well, I commented to somebody that probably only I would notice this in, because that's a 12-volume set that Christopher Tolkien wrote documenting practically every bit of his father's creative process in creating The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and so forth. And yes, I wrote all I read all 12 volumes of that. That's how much of a nerd I really am. And like I said, it's in what? Let's see if I can find out what this is. It's in volume 12. No, hang on. Volume 7. I'm sorry. Volume 7 of that 12-volume set is called The Treason of Isengard, and it's in chapter 20. If anybody wants to look it up, The Riders of Rohan, and it's just in a footnote in that. And I was reading along in that, and I hit that footnote because I read all footnotes. I read everything in a book. I'm one of those readers that, if I run across a book where the footnotes actually fill more of the page than the actual text does, then I'm so right at home.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
I hit that footnote and I went, oh my God, has anybody else noticed this? I've seen no other allusion to this in anybody else's writings. And so that was one of the things that prompted me to write my essay, A Witch by Any Other Name. But yeah, there's proof right there in front of you that the word Wicca or Witcha was being used long before Gardner. I mean, it had always been used, but it had never gone extinct. Something to think about.
Indeed. Now, it seems like I have heard it referenced that the Wiccans, or Wiccans, whichever, is a new religion, and
right.
It's a religion now instead of just the old, basically, way of life. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I think first of all, that's a great question. I think it always was a religion. If you think of religions in a broader sense than the way we in the Western world normally think of religion. Because we've been trained to think of religions as, they all have certain trappings. Religions have a priestly caste. Religions have certain rituals that they always follow. Religions have certain buildings that they practice their rituals in. Religions have certain accoutrements that they always include, and religions always have certain moral precepts that they follow. Religions always have gods and goddesses, or some god or goddess that they worship. And it turns out that none of those things is universally true. People who go to the Orient are often shocked to find that some of the world's great religions, like mainstream Buddhism, does not really have gods or goddesses per se. And a lot of, even more than the mainstream religions, a lot of the smaller tribal, folk, and aboriginal religions don't have a lot of these trappings that we've come to associate with religion. Sometimes they're nothing more than a loose collection of rituals that have been passed down in their family. Maybe it's nothing more than ancestor worship or something like that. But that, to them, is a religion. I would call it, obviously not a mainstream religion, but I would call it a folk religion. And I think it is in that sense that modern witchcraft is a folk religion and always has been and always will be. I remember one time I was at a pagan festival. I was talking to Raven Gramassi about this very thing. And we were talking about the fact that, the changes that have come upon Wicca and how different it is today than when I first started out being a witch. And whether it's going to change to the point where it will go away. And he made the point. He said, the witches have always been with us. They may not have always been called witches, just like the Christians weren't called Christians to begin with. They have changed down through the years, but they will always be here in some sense. And so I think that witchcraft, we can't say we follow the exact same gods and goddesses. We can't say we follow the same rituals that we did, 2,000 years ago, although we still worship in a circle. We still worship on the same old high holidays that we always did. Certain things have there's continuity, but for a lot of specifics, there's not. But that's true for any religion. Modern Christians don't hold their agapes in the catacombs. They typically meet in churches these days, but that's not what the first Christians did. So, yeah, religions change their form as they go down through the years. They adapt, and they have to if they're going to stay relevant to the people who practice it. That only makes sense. But it's very odd that even though Christianity has changed so much down through the years, I mean, Christianity, if you look at it, once had many gods and goddesses. Of course, I'm talking about Gnostic Christianity, but you got to remember that by the 2nd century CE, Gnostic Christianity was a bigger movement than what today we would call proto-Orthodox Christianity. There was more of them. And it was so widespread that Gnostic Christianity even made its way to the British Isles through the Romans that brought it there. And people are just amazed at that. So, yeah, and yet we would not say that today's Christians have no continuity with the Christians of the 1st and 2nd century. And yet the same historians look at witchcraft and say, oh, well, there's no continuity. It was totally made up by Gerald Gardner in the 1950s when he first started publishing his works. And that to me is craziness. That's crazy. So if you think of religion in the broadest sense, in the way that scholars of comparative religion talk about religion, then yes, witchcraft is a religion. It's a folk religion. And like Grimassi and others have said, it always has been and it always will be. But I don't think, going back to our earlier discussion, I don't think it is necessarily, or I think it's a real stretch to try to make it compatible with Christianity.
Oh, absolutely.
One of the things I noticed when I had my bookstore was that people would come in and they would essentially be attracted to a lot of what we might call New Age ideas or New Age spirituality. Some things that are shared by modern Wiccans. But when you press them as to what they actually believe or what they call themselves, they would say, no, I'm a Christian. It was like they couldn't quite give up that label that was too ingrained, I think, from the time that they were children. And even though they no longer believed in Orthodox Christology, they no longer believed that, they were born into original sin and that Jesus came 2,000 years ago to redeem their souls from an eternal hellfire and suffering. Nonetheless, they still called themselves Christian. And it's a real odd thing. It's like the label meant so much to them that they couldn't give up the label, even though their essential belief systems, their spiritual beliefs, had totally changed and really no longer encompassed Christology. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yes. The evolution of it all.
Yeah, I can't remember if that answered your question or not. I was off on a tangent.
I think it probably did, but I'm having problems even remembering what my question was, so we're good.
Good. That's the spell I cast. People don't remember the questions they ask by the time I'm finished with my answers. You can imagine what my classes are like, yeah.
Oh, boy. Well, I have attended one of your talks, and it was wonderful, and, it covered everything, very thorough, and...
oh, thank you.
Yeah. And
so, no sign of Travis yet?
Not yet, not at all.
What the heck?
I don't know. Maybe he decided to go to the bar there instead of, to his computer. Okay. Well, I have another glass of mead I will lift to Travis. So. Raise a glass, yes.
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers. So, what's going...
Well, that's what
Go
I was
ahead.
just thinking. Which direction would you like to go now? Because...
gosh, I guess we could talk a little bit about... I haven't really talked too much about the differences between... well, I talked some about the differences between when I first started practicing witchcraft in 1970 and where witchcraft is today. One of those differences, of course, being the way the word witchcraft itself is used. But there's lots of other differences that we could talk about. One of the things that I've noticed is the changeover from people in the 60s, and of course the Wiccan revival started in the British Isles in the 1950s, but it really didn't reach the United States until the 1960s. And when it did, people were more into traditional covens that followed a particular tradition of modern witchcraft, as opposed to being eclectic. And it seems today that eclecticism has kind of taken over where traditionalist witchcraft has left off. I myself was basically brought up in the traditionalist model, and for me it was Welsh traditionalist. And because of that, I have a deep respect for those who follow these ancient traditions. I think the reason the change occurred was because there were far too few teachers who had the traditional lore to pass on to their students, and instead students, and there were far too many students. I mean, people were just drawn to this like crazy in the 1960s. So they went out and started buying up all the books they could find. And that led to a kind of eclecticism that eventually became the norm, I guess you could say. I think if you polled witches today as to who, are you eclectic or are you traditionalist? Most witches would say, and proudly say, I'm eclectic. I just grab whatever I want from whatever tradition happens to appeal to me at the moment. And I don't want to sound like I'm coming down too hard on that, because in a way, I think they were making a virtue of a necessity. I think for a lot of students, that's all they had. They didn't have an older teacher to pass down traditional lore, so they didn't pick it up. And the sad thing is that a lot of traditional lore ended up being lost, and is still being lost, because there were no students saying, hey, I want to learn this. And it's the difference between, in any subject area, or any field of study, it's the difference between breadth and depth. I think that the eclectics really have an incredible knowledge or breadth of knowledge about their subject, but not necessarily depth. They've not really followed one tradition deeply, whereas the traditionalists know that they've gone really deeply into their own tradition and know it well, and may not have the breadth. And in some ways, the two are complementary. I mean, if you look at the work of somebody like Joseph Campbell, who wrote the Masks of God series and Hero with 1,000 Faces and so forth, he was a brilliant religious comparativist. And I adore his work. I think he was one of the most brilliant religious philosophers of our time. And he could basically quote the same religious story from, all the way from Huna traditions to African traditions to traditions from India, and it would be essentially the same story, just with different characters and a few things changed. But he would point out how they're all teaching the same lesson, and I think that's great. And I think that even somebody like myself, who is a follows a tradition, in my case, Welsh traditionalist, I can learn a great deal about my own tradition by studying other people's tradition, because it gives me kind of you do a contrast and compare sort of thing going on. And that's a good way to learn. But I do feel sad that there aren't more people who are following the old traditionalist ways. And so, again, it's a problem of sources. It's a problem that there are not enough people teaching the old traditional ways. And I wish there were more.
Well, is there a place other than, we know you teach and are more than happy to have the students there. Are all of the elders and such, are they as open to teaching everybody, or are they more selective or secretive, possibly?
They are more, yes, you've hit on a good point. The old traditions are typically more secretive, they're typically initiatory traditions. They might be called mystery religions in the sense of the old Eleusinian mysteries, for example. And because of that, those elders are not going to come up to you and say, "Hey, would you like to know my tradition?" I've never done that to anybody, because one of the things that really separated, for example, Christianity from witchcraft was that Christianity actively believed in proselytizing. They would go out and try to pull people into the fold, as we've talked about. It was absolutely verboten, absolutely forbidden for somebody who was a traditionalist witch to come up and say, "Hey, would you like to come to my next coven meeting? Would you like to see how we do things?" In fact, when I first started teaching witchcraft, I used to tell people this. I'd tell them, this was back in 1970, if somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, would you like to come to our next coven meeting?" then run, do not walk to the nearest exit, because they do not have anything traditional to teach you.
Right.
I think it's true. I may be wrong on this. Maybe somebody in our chat room can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it is still true that groups like the Freemasons and so forth are forbidden to say, "Would you like to join us?" It has to be initiated by the seeker. The student has to come to the teacher and say, "I know you know stuff. Will you teach me?" Because that already says something about the student. That already says that they're willing to seek it out. They're willing to take that chance. They're willing to go beyond what they already know and learn from somebody. And consequently, most traditional teachers, if approached in this manner, will say, "Yes, I will teach you what I know." But they are not going to proselytize and go around standing on street corners and handing out pamphlets saying, "Will you come to the next coven meeting?" That's not going to happen.
Or the end is nigh, yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, that's how a lot of people get into paganism today. And witchcraft today is because somebody said, "Oh, I'm a witch. Would you like to see how we do things? Come on over to our next coven meeting." Or what's even become more common is come on to our pagan festival, where we'll have hundreds of people practicing huge ritual, huge public rituals and so forth. People have often remarked that whenever there's a public ritual going on, and even when I am at a pagan festival, I become very scarce. They can't find me, and that's not by accident. I'm a traditionalist. I really believe in perfect love and perfect trust, and as far as those people that I do my rituals with, and those are only the people in my coven. And I don't have a coven now, but at one time that would have only meant the people in my coven. I do not necessarily have perfect love and perfect trust with a group of 100 or more people in a big field whom I don't know, whom I've never met.
It would seem a little foolish, honestly, these days.
It honestly does. And if you've done magical work, you know that a lot of it is, you have to drop your shields, metaphorically.
Right.
Star Trek reference. But you have to drop your shields in order to project power out or to pull information, like divinatory information, in. And because of that, it leaves you a little bit vulnerable. That's why you only do it with the people you love and trust. That's why you only do it within the magic circle. And it's a whole different thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing that people are doing big public rituals. It's not a bad thing, but it's a different thing. It's not where witches were in the 1960s, for example. And so I still have a lot of that. I did another essay kind of talking about this on my, and it's not in my book, but it is on my website, witchessabbats.com, called Reflections on Old Guard Paganism or something like that. And it kind of sets up a kind of a list of dualities or kind of polar opposites in which people who consider them, or people who are new guard pagans, how they react to things as opposed to how old guard pagans react to things. And it's important to point out that this is not necessarily just a matter of how old a person is. I was talking to my friend Alexia, who's in the chat room, just the other night, and she was saying, yeah, she's a younger person, much younger than me, but in terms of her feeling about stuff, she read that article and she was like, I kind of have more of the feeling of what old guard pagans feel. And it's like, yeah, I've actually had that same feedback from a lot of people. A lot of younger people will read that and go, wow, that's really different from what I've experienced, and I wish I could do this. So it's not so much a matter of your age as it is a matter of your kind of orientation, how you feel about the craft and how you feel about your practice.
Well, there's so many pretenders out there as well, the charlatans who don't honestly believe in anything, but they're looking for every follower they can get, and
yes,
to get the power from it and what have you. That's
exactly.
Another scary aspect.
It is, because and that's another thing I always warn my students about. If anybody is not only saying to you, come to my coven and be a part of my coven, and I am the high priestess and I am the ruler of this coven, run, do not walk to the nearest exit.
Right. And don't
because
stop
you're just,
for the Kool-Aid either.
No, do not. Because if you think about it, witchcraft is a religion of clergy. There is no congregation. If you are a witch, then by definition, you are a priest or a priestess. And the two people in the coven that are designated high priest and a high priestess, the only reason they have that designation is because somebody has to kind of get all the other priests and priestesses working together. So it's I guess a good analogy would be a symphony orchestra. So, somebody has to be the conductor. Somebody has to stand at the front and hold the baton.
Right.
And but that doesn't mean that they're any more talented than first violin or first cello or whatever. In a true witchcraft circle, you have all priests and all priestesses. They are all empowered to do the priestly things of casting the circle, of calling the quarters, of drawing down the moon, of invoking the gods and the goddesses. Those are all priestly functions, rightly considered. So the person who's high priestess or high priest is simply the one who's getting everybody to work together. Like they're the director of a play, but that doesn't mean that their vote counts for anything more than any other member. I guess the French phrase "first among equals" would be what I would think of. But their vote doesn't count for anything more. Just because they've been in it longer doesn't count for anything. They are all equal. And in fact, in my tradition, the Welsh tradition, we don't even have degrees. And when I say Welsh traditionalists, by the way, I'm not speaking for all Welsh traditionalists, because there are many different groups that call themselves Welsh traditionalists. But one of the things I've noticed is that they do tend to have certain things in common. And one of those things is they don't have degrees, because they are very almost obsessed by the idea of equality within their group. To them, the idea of this circle is pure and holy. And the thing about a circle geometrically is that every point on the circle is equidistant from the center, right?
Correct.
So it's like King Arthur's Round Table. For the very same reason, King Arthur founded a round. And by the way, the Welsh will tell you, Arthur was Welsh. Oh, absolutely,
course,
no
yes.
question about this. And they believe in his ideal that there shouldn't be a head of the table. And that's why he created the round table, so that nobody could sit at the head. And that same idea was taken up, I think, by the Welsh traditionalist Wiccans and witches, who still follow that and don't even have degrees. And that's such an abused idea in modern witchcraft. What does it mean to possess? I'm second degree, I'm third degree, and again, that's often used as kind of a power thing.
Sure.
A one-upmanship. To me, well, yes, there should be, learning going on. People do advance in their knowledge of the craft, but that doesn't mean you need to hang badges on them at any given point, or that they have to be second or third degree or what have you. But to me, it's a lifelong process of learning. You never stop. And I'm an author, and people consider me an authority on the holidays and so forth, and that's really nice, but I don't seek that. That's not why I do it. I do it because I'm interested. That's my thing. And if I happen to end up knowing a little bit more about it, then that's kind of a sidebar. And I'm glad to teach. I'm glad to share what I know. But I never stop learning. That just goes on forever for me. And the other thing is, in different traditions, the degrees don't map to one another. Somebody who's first degree in this tradition might be equivalent to somebody who's third degree in this tradition. It's just so meaningless. So yeah, we don't even have degrees in the Welsh tradition.
Very good. Now, are you doing okay? Do you need a drink break or anything? You could...
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe since we were talking about the Welsh, I sent you a song along that I did some years back. Would you have that queued up?
Actually, I do. That would be Music Lady.
It would, and I'll give a little background on this because it does mention some of the Welsh characters from Welsh mythology. It mentions both Gwydion, who is a prince of the ancient kingdom of North Wales. In fact, the coven to which I belonged was called New Gwynedd, and Gwynedd was the name given to North Wales. And Gwydion is one of the great enchanters. He was often called Gwydion the Golden-Tongued. He was a bard, he was a musician, he was a writer, he was an enchanter. He was also a trickster god, And as so many mythologies have trickster gods, from Loki to Coyote, it seems like almost all of them, although Alexia mentioned the other night that the Hawaiians don't seem to have one, which is interesting. Yeah, he is a trickster god. Now, and the other person mentioned in this song is Taliesin, and we've already talked about Taliesin. We opened the show tonight with cut by Deep Purple from the Book of Taliesin. So I mentioned that too, because Taliesin was the bard, the quintessential bard of the ancient Welsh people, and his great boast was that he remembered all the lives that he had ever lived through reincarnation, and that was referenced in the Deep Purple song. And not only did he remember all the lives that he had lived down through the ages, but whenever anything important happened in history, he was there, which is great. He boasts about being in Bethlehem when Jesus was born. He boasts about being all of these different things that happened all down through the years. Taliesin was always there and was an eyewitness to any important moment in history. So, yeah, I ended up writing this song called Music Lady, and it was actually an older song that I wrote. I wrote this back when I was in college, but a good friend of mine, whom a lot of people listening might know, Fritz Young, had written to me asking. People might know him because he and his partner Ren Walker are the two people who basically founded one of the biggest websites devoted to witchcraft today, called The Witch's Voice, or witchbox.com. And Fritz, like me, is an absolute devotee of 60s rock music, and he creates a lot of this music himself. So the cut you'll be hearing is nobody there but Fritz. He's doing all the vocals, all the instruments, and everything. And he wrote to me and asked if I had any songs, any original songs, because he knew I was a songwriter. And I gave him Music Lady, and he said, "Yeah, I love it. Because it mentions magic, and it mentions, the Welsh characters from mythology and stuff." So he did a cover of it that just absolutely blew me away. So, Fritz Young.
All right, then without further ado, we'll have about a 4.5-minute song. Do what you gotta do, listen, and here we go, Music Lady. And that was Fritz Jung, excuse me, Jung or Young?
Pronounced Jung, like
Okay.
like Carl Jung.
Carl
and
Jung,
he's
okay.
related. Yeah, he's related to him actually.
I had wondered. I thought, that's very interesting with, your psychology degree and then the parapsychology and then the Jungs and
Yeah. Fritz is, and I was telling you during the break, I was just blown away when I got that track back from Fritz. Because to me, in my mind, I had only ever performed it by singing and playing a guitar on my own. And you can't do a lot of that kind of stuff when it's just you and one guitar. So this is kind of how I always heard it in my mind, but Fritz really, really nailed it. So good for him.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Fritz, if you're listening to this.
Our hats off to Fritz.
Yes.
Alrighty, well, we've gone through. Let's talk a little bit more about the trickster gods and how the Hawaiian mythos doesn't actually include one.
Right, that was news to me. I was thinking later, it may be, we've probably lost a good deal of lore in any, Aboriginal and tribal context. So it's possible that even if we don't know of one now, that there might have been one at one time and we've just lost it. So much has been lost. When Neil Gaiman recently did that book on Norse mythology, which is brilliant, by the way. If anybody wants to brush up on their Norse mythology, get the new book by Neil Gaiman. And same Neil Gaiman that you know from other places. And he talks about the fact that he would love to tell you the myth of this goddess or that god. And because we know their names, we know they had myths connected to them at one time, but they've been lost. And
Absolutely.
That's such a sad thing. Sad. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep, the Christian god came through and threw all of them down into the dungeon. They didn't get near so many worshippers, so have become a little obsolete. But then again, not really. It's all history, if nothing else.
Yeah, and the poets and the romantics have kept them alive. You look at a lot of the classical allusions in, for example, classical Victorian poetry and so forth, and those gods and goddesses are still very much, I think, in the hearts of the poets who wrote about them, even though they themselves are ostensibly Christian, but it's not like they ever really went away.
Well, the people quite often refer to their muses, which, I believe that goes back to the Greek pantheon.
Yes. Yeah.
But I would imagine
muses.
all of them had their own version of them.
Yes, and we've kept them alive today in movies like what was the movie with Olivia Newton-John? And Gene Kelly, that big musical
right.
thing. I can't think of it at the moment. Xanadu, thank you. Yeah, because she plays a muse in that film. She doesn't actually name herself in the film. She starts to at one point, and she gets interrupted. But it's terpsichore. Right. And
yep.
So the muses were 9 sisters who lived on Mount Helicon, I believe, and gave inspired poets everywhere, poets, musicians, and every other kind of artist.
Right.
That's their job.
Right. I couldn't name them, but I knew they were
out there.
I guess.
And they're odd. There's like a muse of choral music, muse of dancing, muse of I don't know, all different kinds of strange things.
Right. Oh, sorry. Travis is in his room.
Oh, really?
His phone is down to 5%. He doesn't have a car charger. Yes, Travis, I know you're not listening, but get your laptop hooked up and we'll bring you in for a few minutes.
You've got 30 minutes, Travis.
Yeah.
And you've missed everything.
You've missed all of the really cool discussions.
Does he ever go back and listen to the podcast recordings?
I don't know if he does or not. I don't, because I hate my voice on listening to the recordings.
Everybody does.
I know.
I mean, not your voice. Yep. I don't mean I hate your voice. I mean,
gee, thanks, Mike.
Yeah, I know. I mean, everybody typically hates their own voice unless they get really used to it. Like, I've gotten to the point where I've heard my voice, the recording, so much that I'm totally used to my own voice. But typically people hear their own voice differently because of bone conduction. You hear yourself through that, and rather than hearing your voice acoustically. So you sound very different to yourself than you sound to other people. And people hear themselves on tape and go, "That's not me." Yes, it is.
I sound like Minnie Mouse. Leave me alone. Okay, who is... don't forget a shout-out for your mentor, Mike.
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me. In learning about the Welsh tradition, when I was in Columbia, there was a woman there who I knew for a while. Her first name was Carol, and she spelled it Carole, like Carole King. And but I do not remember her last name, and an awful lot of what I got taught in terms of the Welsh tradition was from Carol. And so I wanted to say, if she is listening tonight, or if anybody, I should say too, she was from Tennessee, but she was living in Columbia at the time, and I was just fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time to hook up with her. And when I talked to Aidan Kelly, he said he thought he knew who it might be, but I haven't heard back from him on that yet. So if anybody listening tonight knows who Carol from Tennessee, who follows a Welsh traditionalist witchcraft tradition, is, please let me know, because I've been trying to reconnect with her for years. Without a last name, it's a little difficult.
It can be difficult. Yes, yeah, that would. Hey, are you Carol?
Yeah. Oh, Carol.
A Carol, but maybe not the Carol, right?
Yes, right.
Well, moving right along, would you like to talk about the solitary practice as opposed to coven work?
Yeah, that's a good topic. When I first, of course, encountered witchcraft, I started out as a solitary because I had no choice, and that was typical back in the 1960s. I think I mentioned that I first became a witch in 1970. And it was through a self-dedication. And the reason was because I did not know any other witches at that time. I grew up in a little town in Missouri called Carrollton, and I don't believe there were any other witches in Carrollton in 1970. I could be wrong, but I doubt it.
They probably burned them out.
So... I decided I was going to take this step, and it was really kind of spooky scary because I did not know anybody else who had done what I was doing at that time in renouncing the religion that I was brought up in, Catholicism and Christianity, moreover, and saying that I was henceforth devoting my life to the goddess and would follow her. But the thing is, I had already been reading about witchcraft for practically all of my high school years, from 1966 to 1970. So I had, rather than a year and a day of training, I had 4 years of reading every book I could get my hands on witchcraft. Mm-hmm. And I felt that after 4 years, I had enough knowledge to make that move. But I was solitary still for a long time after that when I went down to Columbia and suddenly to the University of Missouri at Columbia. I was surrounded by a lot of people who were interested in witchcraft, a lot of people who were reading the same books that I was, but they didn't belong to covens. They had not made contact with any older covens. There was a rumor that there was an active coven in Colombia of older people at that time, but I could not make contact with them. I tried, but I never succeeded. So I went on practicing as a solitary for quite a long time before I ever met another witch. And it was sometime after that before there was any talk of forming a coven. And you know what? I think there is something to be said for starting out as a solitary. I really truly think that every witch should go through at least a phase of being a solitary, preferably at the beginning, because it forces you to learn what magic feels like to you. And that may be very different from what magic feels like to someone else. And that was one of the things I would try to drill into my students. If you come across a teacher who says, oh, this is how this spell is supposed to feel, or this is how this magic is supposed to feel, again, run, do not walk to the nearest exit. I've said that a lot tonight. But because that's going to get you in trouble. Magic does not feel the same way to every person. And you've got to get your feet on the ground when it comes to knowing how to handle these energies. And the only way to build that kind of self-confidence in handling them, in understanding them, in recognizing them, in knowing how to direct them, is to do it solitary for a while. Unfortunately, I think too many people today don't ever have a solitary phase. Their first introduction into witchcraft is by either going to a pagan festival and doing large group rituals, which is pretty much they're the congregation. Usually they don't even have an active role. Or they join a coven. And
hey guys.
Hey, Travis.
Hey,
I apologize.
Travis.
You're just in time.
Apparently, I'm joining the coven.
Yes, you. Yeah. And I was just telling you how unfortunate that may be for you. Because
you're preaching to the choir.
Good, or preaching to the pulpit in your case.
In that case, this is true.
Yes, because if your first experience in witchcraft is as a member of a coven, then you only learn to experience magic in the setting of that group dynamic. You only experience magic and that kind of energy in the way that the group does, which might not actually be your own native way of feeling magic. And consequently, a lot of these people whose entire experience of witchcraft is in covens, if they have to do something on their own, they're clueless. They do not know what to do. They can't cast a circle on their own. They can't do a spell on their own. They can't invoke a god or a goddess on their own. They don't know how to do it outside of the coven formula. And I think that's very sad. So I really encourage people to at least, if you've never been a solitary, it would probably be a good idea to kick back and, take a year and a day and start to feel what magic means to you, what it feels like to control those energies on your own, because you probably will never get that as long as you are operating strictly within the coven dynamic. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. It kind of takes us back to, like, the kids these days that travel in packs, and very few are... a lot of them feel alone, but they don't know how to thrive on their own or by themselves, if that makes if that one makes sense too.
It does, yeah. And the other nice thing about being solitary is a lot of times you find out where your own forte is, and once you find your own particular interests, your own what's the Monty Python way of putting it? Your own idiom. You find your own idiom, and you are then if you do join a coven, or you do go back to the coven that you timed out of or taken a sabbatical from, you're able to bring to them those things that you have found on your own. And, one of the things, again, in the Welsh tradition, in which I grew up practicing from the time of college forward, from the time I met Carol, one of the things was that every person within our coven, within New Gwynedd, specialized in some particular area of knowledge. We had our coven herbalist, we had our coven astrologer, we had our coven tarot player, divination person. We had, each person had their own particular forte, and then we would exchange that information at the Sabbats, or even at the Esbats, the full moon celebration. More typically, actually, at the Esbats, the full moon celebrations. Each one of us would say, "Okay, I'll do a class this full moon on the tarot cards. Okay, next time I will do a class on Welsh mythology. Next time I will do a class on astrology," whatever. And by doing that, each person brings the thing that they are most passionate about, into the group. And what a great way that is to teach everyone, because then everybody picks up on that same enthusiasm that the first person has, and the teaching level is so much higher in a coven like that. So that's why it's good to have those kind of individual specializations.
Well, and I'm coming in late to the conversation. I do apologize. Duty has called today in ways in which I wish it had not. But what you're talking about, Mike, to take it out of the witchcraft setting and the coven setting, it's very similar. I played basketball when I was in high school. I coached basketball for a couple of years. It's almost like team building. A team is only as good as the individual players. Mm-hmm. That old adage, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. You really can't be strong as an individual unless you have had to thrive as an individual solitarily by yourself. And then once you know what your strengths and weaknesses are, then you know what you bring to a greater dynamic. Exactly.
That's exactly right.
And then you have a greater appreciation for what other individuals bring to that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Absolutely true.
Team mentality.
Yep, and never any reason to be ashamed of striking out on your own again either. And,
right.
Sometimes you'll find, and this is important for people who are seeking out a coven. Even I've been talking about how important it is to get together with people who do have the ability to pass down traditional lore. Yes, that is important, but make sure that they are a good fit for you. A lot of people think, I'm going to be joining this coven. I'm going to be, they're going to train me for a year and a day. I'm just going to do everything I can to fit in with them. Like they are auditioning you for your place in the coven. Don't forget, you are auditioning the coven as well. Yep. They have to be a good fit for you. It has to go both ways. That's my recommendation.
I want to know where I go for this Welsh mythology class, because I love mythology.
Oh, yes. Well, I've actually taken on a student at this point, and I'm doing it in the traditional way, which is to teach it orally and one-on-one. That's one of the things that you can't really do in big general classes. Because in the first part, for the one reason, a lot of the material is what we call oath-bound, which means that it's secret, it's initiatory, it's right. Like the mystery religions. But if you are interested in at least starting on reading about Welsh mythology. Of course, you can read the Mabinogion, which it's the Welsh national epic, essentially. It is to the Welsh people what the Iliad and the Odyssey were to the ancient Greeks. And you probably, I would recommend a modern retelling of the Mabinogion by an author named Evangeline Walton. She has done just an incredible. Most people think of her as a modern-day fantasy author in the same way that J.R.R. Tolkien or C.S. Lewis is thought of. And she wrote her first book called The Island of the Mighty way back in 1936, and that was her retelling of the fourth branch of the Mabinogi. There are 4 branches in all, so it was the final one. And she started out with the last one, but there's a reason for that. It's just much more engaging, I think, than the others. And in that book, it's really interesting because it's 1936, and yet at the beginning of that book, she has a little paragraph that's where the dedication normally stands in a book, where she invokes the god Gwydion as the god of writers and calls him Gwydion the Golden-Tongued, and invokes his help with her writing of the book. And that's an amazing thing people who say, okay, modern Wicca didn't exist until Gardner, 1950s, etc. Here's somebody writing in 1936 who is, probably wouldn't have called herself Wiccan, but she's invoking an ancient Welsh god to help her with the writing of this novel. So no, it never went away. And that's yet another good proof of that. Another good proof is a man named Kenneth Morris, who took stories from the Mabinogion and taught them through classes that he taught in the field of theosophy. He was one of the great theosophical writers of his time. And that, again, was long before Gardner. And you can find lots of examples of that, though, where this traditional knowledge keeps leaking through. And that's wonderful when you run across it.
It really is. Mm-hmm. I do read a lot of fiction, like urban fantasy, and the mages and the wizards and the witches and things.
Sure.
And they touch on things that make me go, I wonder if they made that up. And then I look it up, and it'll be some obscure old lore or something, and it's a lot of fun for me. I enjoy that.
Right, and within modern fantasy writing, and of course people always take Tolkien as the parade example of that, and of course, as I explained earlier, I'm a huge Tolkien fan, having read all 12 volumes of Christopher Tolkien's History of Middle-earth, including all the footnotes. But
the best part.
There are some modern fantasy writers who have specialized in retelling the ancient myths of people, and this fantasy area is usually referred to as mythopoeic fantasy. So if you look for lists of mythopoeic fantasy writers, you will find people like Evangeline Walton. Who else? I'm thinking of one that does the Irish myths, and I can't think of him at the moment. But anyway, there are a number of people who really excel at retelling the actual native mythology of different peoples. And I love reading their stuff. Just adore it. I like it better, actually, than reading, modern fantasy, sword and sorcery stuff, because I know that this stuff was actually believed by people. These were their gods and goddesses.
Right.
And these were the
system. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and these were the stories they told to one another around the campfires at night. So, yeah, that's great when you can come across writers who do that.
Absolutely. Mythopoeic, is that right?
Yes, yes, that's correct. There used to be, a long time ago in Kansas City, Mythopoeic Fantasy Society, where a group of us got together when I first moved here in 1976 and just discussed nothing but the mythopoeic fantasy writers. So that was great.
Oh, I'll bet. A tiny bit before my time, but not a whole lot.
Yeah. Don't start telling me how old I am or calling me an elder or anything.
I'm not remotely. I am almost an elder myself. So, now, why is it you don't like to be called an elder?
Well, I don't like it because I think it materially cuts down on my chances of getting a date for any given Saturday night. Oh, in our chat room, yes, Alexia has been nice enough to actually transcribe the dedication to Gwydion that Evangeline Walton wrote in The Island of the Mighty. So, with your permission, I'm going to read this, assuming that some people may not have access to the chat room. Would that be?
Please do. Absolutely.
Evangeline Walton opened this book with this. Hail to you, Gwydion, across the gulf of the ages. Gwydion, god and artist of the ancient Western world. You, the writer's particular and personal god, patron of our art and incarnate quintessence of all our faults and virtues, or of those virtues we most long for. You whom we have worshipped through the centuries, though we forgot and left unhonored the name of you. If you have not turned your back on us utterly, as the drabness of modern literature sometimes makes me fear, or until time brings you to a new rebirth, hear me. Accept this offering, Gwydion the golden-tongued, whose speech was stronger than the arms of men.
The end.
Yeah. Is that beautiful?
Yes, it is.
And again, 1936 was when that was written. And that's as pagan as anything.
Great Depression, when everyone was looking for something.
That was as pagan as anything you can find being written today for modern pagan ceremonies. And yet there it was in 36, long before anybody had heard the name of Gerald Gardner.
Right.
So, yeah. Thank you, Alexia. That was lovely of you to have done that.
Yes, thank you, Alexia. She's... okay, now that takes me right to the commercials for Alexa.
Is that her voice?
Maybe. Sorry, Alexia, I couldn't resist a little bit, but thank you so much for your help in the chat room. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Is Travis hanging with us yet, or?
He's still here.
Okay.
I was just listening to the translation.
Cool. Now, what does our former Southern Baptist minister think of these things? Did I get it right? It was Southern Baptist, correct?
No, I've been a little bit of everything.
Yeah, but you actually preached as one.
I did. I was ordained as a Southern Baptist minister. They haven't taken it back yet. I keep waiting for them, like the Spanish Inquisition, to just pop up out of nowhere and take it back, because no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. No one expects the Southern Baptists to come and take the ordination away.
So you live in fear of the pounding on your door in the middle of the night.
For all kinds of reasons.
Is that like burning crosses and white sheeted?
No, that's a different Southern.
Whole different kind of thing. Yeah.
That's a whole different Southern.
Oh, okay, okay.
Kind of Southern repertoire. No, I do not speak for the Southern Baptist or any denomination. My way of thinking has always been, and I remember growing up as a child and having conversations with my parents. And my parents, I love dearly. I joke about them on this program, as I did when Cindy McKean did her reading on me and things like that. But I do love my parents dearly. but I did have very, very open discussions with my father, especially growing up. I remember being 4 or 5 years old and questioning everything that I was hearing in Sunday school. Every possible construct and concept of fallen man and the apple and Adam and Eve and the serpent and all of these things, and none of it made sense to me. The older I got, the more I continued to question, and the more in my mind, what you're getting to, what you're asking, Wendy, when I hear stories about the Welsh and the Celtic and the Wiccan and the Native American and the Aboriginal types of belief systems, I still have a very, very strong personal belief that everything that most world religions are talking about is the same thing. We have culturalized it, we have marginalized it, we have wrapped it in a way in which we can understand it, and then we all, in so doing, have watered it down to the point that the true mystery and the true power that exists, we have no concept of anymore. When I listen to Native Americans talk about the Great Spirit, and I'm thinking, okay, well that's God. Whatever your interpretation of God is, that's the word that I use because that's the construct that I was given as a child.
Yeah, I've got to interrupt for a second, or not interrupt, but interject, because this reminds me so much of something I heard in a lecture by Joseph Campbell, and we were talking about him earlier. He's the great master of comparative.
Comparative mythology. I have 2 of his books, as a matter of fact.
Hero with 1,000 Faces and Masks of God, perhaps.
Yes. those are two.
Exactly. And I got a chance to hear Joseph Campbell speak personally here in Kansas City. And I'll never forget one of the things he said. He said the problem with Christianity is that their followers insist upon seeing it as history instead of seeing it as mythology, which robs it of all its power.
Yes. And that's been, and Wendy has heard me say this on this program as we've interviewed people about the possibility of extraterrestrials and the possibility of demonic forces. I mean, I grew up in a Baptist church that believed in God and they believed in angels, but if you started talking to them about demons and demonic forces, they didn't want to hear anything about that because they didn't want to even acknowledge the fact that those exist. And in my mind, I'm going, okay, if you believe in the existence of one, there has to be the existence of the other. And a good friend of mine, his wife refused to believe in God. She believed in the existence of the devil and of Satan, but she refused to believe in God. And she called herself an atheist. And I said, you are not an atheist. No. I said, by definition, if you believe in only one form, you are, by the truest definition, a Satanist.
Uh-huh.
You believe in one form of existence, and that is the evil or the Luciferian construct. Right. I said, you can't call yourself an atheist. I said, you don't believe in God, that's fine. And I find that there's this struggle many times, and we try to compartmentalize these things. We try to say, okay, well, God is this, and Satan is this, and angels are this, and demons are this. When in reality, I was working I'm about 4 classes away from a master's in theology. And one of my major undertakings that I was trying to talk about was when you start talking about world religions, I really don't think that there are world religions. I think there is a world belief system that we have used our various languages and our various definitions and terminology to, as I said before, bring into a way in which we can understand it.
Going back to your point a little bit earlier, Travis, about how somebody could believe in God and yet not believe in the opposite, or somebody who can believe in all positive energy but not negative energy. That's always been amazing to me that people could believe that way. And one of the best answers I ever heard to that addressed that was from a science fiction writer named Ursula Le Guin, who once wrote, "To light a candle is to cast a shadow."
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
And that is a beautifully poetic definition and description of reality.
Yes.
So,
absolutely.
And you know, and one of my, and this is one of those ways in which I was very different as a Southern Baptist, minister. People would talk about the power of, that you can't let darkness come in, you can't let darkness come in. I said, but if you really look, and if you are a literal, interpretive Christian, and you interpret it word by word, the book of Genesis, in the beginning there was darkness. Light had to come. Light had to come. There was darkness first, then there was light.
Mm-hmm.
If you walk into a room like I did tonight when I walked into my hotel room and I had left the curtains closed and there was not a single light on, this room was like walking into a black hole. There was no light whatsoever. I had to turn the light on. Right. Both of those things exist in direct opposition of one another.
Right. And I think every ancient mythology addresses that.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily that they are battling one another. They just happen to coexist.
Yes.
Well, it's like both sides to be well balanced.
I was just going to say, two sides of the same coin. You cannot have one without the other.
Right.
Well, and if you have seen the newest installment in the Star Wars movies, The Last Jedi, they actually do a very good job of dealing with that with the character Rey.
I have not seen that.
I haven't.
They do. I mean, of course, you always got, with the Force, the light side and the dark side. And Luke Skywalker is training Rey, and in her very first lesson, he's trying to teach her about the light and the darkness, and she is immediately drawn to the darkness, but not in an evil way. She just goes there with a great understanding of it and a great ability to embrace it and deal with it, but she comes right back to the light side. Right. And it's a very, very powerful image and a very, very powerful, I think, statement about, as Lucas has done with his entire storytelling in the Star Wars mythology, of what religion is. It's not something that you can, codify into, the Jedis or any one particular thing, and that's what Luke Skywalker ends up saying. I can die, but I will never be the last of the Jedi.
Well, take it to a personal level, too. It's not just a religion that is all light as opposed to all dark, but within each person there is light and there is darkness, and you have to face that. Go back to we talked about Carl Jung earlier, and of course his name comes up always when you talk about dealing with your shadow self. You have to know, you have to face that shadow side of you. Every person has to face that, and it's only through the understanding of that you can really progress spiritually, that you can even come to the light. You have to understand that shadow, your shadow self, your the evil twin, the weird, whatever you're going to call it. But yes, it's in each of us, and it's in the universe, because we reflect. We are part of that universe. We cannot be meaningfully separated from the way the universe works. So, of course, there is light and there is darkness.
Absolutely.
And then it went all deep, and we all embraced the Force.
If I had,
it won't replace it. I'm sorry, it won't replace a good blaster.
But if I had an oscillating
Laser
fan,
set to stun.
Exactly. True. True. But if I had a decent oscillating fan, I would be breathing into it. I am your father. As every kid who grew up in the late 70s and early 80s did when there was an oscillating fan. So
we're running into extra innings, folks.
We are. That's okay. we have a little time if everybody's still interested and wants to talk, or we can start slowly moving towards shutting her down and waiting for the next installment with including Mike.
Yeah, and I do apologize, Mike, for having to miss the bulk of this program, and I do want to bring you back on because you and I do think in very similar veins when it comes to many things, and there is a commonality in the conversation. Unfortunately, I was playing, I don't exactly know, I would say Driving Miss Daisy, but that's somewhat a bit of a mismatch.
I agree with you, Travis, and all I can say is you were greatly missed. I wish you had been here, and obviously the two of you still have not learned your lesson if you're talking about having me.
Wait a minute, what I miss? What I miss?
Oh, I had said something on my Facebook page about how Wendy and Travis obviously haven't learned their lesson if they've invited me back to be a returning guest.
Oh, all of our returning guests are horrible individuals. The only reason they're brought back is because they disturb everything, just like Wendy and I do.
There you go.
True.
Yeah. It's to shake things up a little bit. We have to rattle cages and get people to, honestly having discussions and talking. And it was so funny. I was talking to two guys the other night from Santa Maria, California. They were at the hotel bar here where I'm staying. And they're actually, it's so funny. I am staying at the Jenny Wiley State Resort Park. I stay here Sunday through Thursday so I can be on site for my job. But I'm literally like the only person who's staying. It's very much like staying at the Overlook. Every so often, every so often I get graced by, I'll walk into the lounge and there'll be somebody else sitting at the bar. And so
Scatman Brothers?
I know, exactly, right? That's
everybody wants to be a cat. No.
Yeah.
Sorry, went Disney on you.
Yes, you did. Night before last, it was these two brothers from Santa Maria, California, and they're one is a real estate lawyer, the other's a real estate developer. They just bought a strip mall here in the area, and they were doing their due diligence. So we were talking and shooting the breeze and having these conversations. Last night, I got introduced to a guy who works for the Kentucky Emergency Management Association, but he's a stand-in actor. And here's the funny thing, Wendy. He knows Susan Bell and Vernon Wells.
What's his name?
His name is Rocco Pepe. I swear to God, that's his name. His name is Rocco Pepe. He's Italian. He's from New Jersey. But these are the first three people that I have laid eyes on in like 2 weeks. It's always just me and the staff of the hotel here.
That's not a very lucrative endeavor. It doesn't sound like.
It's not on their part. It's not. But I've joked periodically that if they see me wandering the grounds with an axe in my hand.
All work just no play makes Travis a dull boy.
Exactly. Just overlook me.
That's Travis's new book.
Yeah.
But what's really bizarre is now that it's snowed and we've got like 6 inches of snow, I even feel more like that when I came in tonight. It's like, oh my God. And I swear to God, if I walk down one of these hallways and I see twins at the end.
Yeah.
That's it.
Time to check out.
Yeah, it's time to check.
Yeah.
Well, you can check out anytime you like, but you can
never leave. Exactly.
Which is a phrase I've always related to the Overlook Hotel. I don't know why that is.
Yes,
it's very, very true. Very, very, very true. So, yeah.
Wow.
Now we need to talk. We need to bring Richard Estep in because he does the ghost tours.
He does at Stanley. At the Stanley, I know. But it was so funny because I was my daughter has gotten into Stephen King, and I was trying to remember which one she read first. God, I can't remember, but we just bought the first half, It Chapter 1, the new remake, and she and I watched that last weekend. So she's all about it, but she did read The Shining. And I told her, I said, I remember reading The Shining. It was back, I was in college. It was late 80s, early 90s. And I read it during a snowstorm, snowed in at my parents' house, which is worse than being snowed in at the Overlook. Going back to how much I love my parents, but it is worse than being snowed in at the Overlook. Being snowed in at my parents' house, yeah, that was bad.
You know, The Shining is one of those interesting bits of pop culture where there's always this debate over which is better, the book or the movie, and you'll have these people who are diehard fans of this happened with Tolkien, for example, the Lord of the Rings, diehard fans of the books saying, oh, the Peter Jackson movies were terrible because they didn't follow the books. And so this is one of the great examples to me of where I loved the Stephen King book, The Shining, and I absolutely adored the Stanley Kubrick film, The Shining, even though they are
for different reasons. Very
exactly,
yes.
Because telling a story, via media like a movie is a very different thing than telling it in print. And it doesn't always translate. I mean, in Tolkien's book, you can get away with pages and pages of description of what kind of landscape the hobbits are walking through. But that doesn't translate really well into a movie. So Peter Jackson did what he did and made it brilliant. And it's the same thing. The Shining, to me, is one of the best examples of that, where I like both versions for totally different reasons.
Well, and I think Stephen King, even more so than Tolkien, is a prime example of an author whose books translate to two different mediums, but not for the same reason. Mm-hmm. King is an ultimate storyteller, and he involves himself and loses himself, and many times the reader, in minutia that really isn't necessary to the story, although there's so many different levels that he deals with. And The Shining is one of those examples. I mean, and Kubrick did an amazing job, even with the casting and telling that story. Oh, yeah. But I mean, even King said, it's a great movie because it's like, what was the quote that King said? It's like a beautiful car that doesn't have a motor. And that was his quote about the movie. He loved the movie, but he didn't like it as a translation of his film. And that was the case with many of King's stories. I mean, it wasn't until...
What did he feel about Christine? Do you know? Because I've always loved that one.
I do like that one. I don't know. What I know is that it was when King took control of his books is when he started letting them be turned into miniseries like The Stand, and he was an executive producer, and he had more control. Then that's when things started changing for the interpretation of King's works onto film.
And I think a lot of authors prefer miniseries to movies because especially
if you're writing out. Yeah, especially if you're writing books the length that King was writing them, right, and going in depth and
not
things
to mention
like
Tolkien.
But which Netflix has licensed the Lord of the Rings for a new series.
Yes.
So I think that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. And I don't think they can possibly cover the same ground that the Jackson films covered, which means that they're going to have to go into the Silmarillion or some other sources, which would be great because there are great stories within that.
Yes. And it's especially for Tolkien, because, I mean, God, the man created an entire universe, and
more than any other, I think.
Yes, more than any other. He literally created it using multiple universes, using multiple religions, multiple cultures, and he created an entire his own creation. In all honesty, it's so difficult. Don't get me wrong. I love the Lord of the Rings movies. I think Peter Jackson did an amazing job of translating them. I like the Hobbit trilogy. I think he did a good job. Jackson's a good storyteller when it comes to translating into films. He is. He's just a good storyteller.
Totally.
And I think he needs those. I think he needs a longer platform. I watched his his interpretation of King Kong. I liked it. Way too long for a movie. I mean,
Jack Black was brilliant though.
Jack Black, Jack Black is one of those actors that he really can take characters and give them a very, very nuanced personality.
Here's something. I don't know if you guys have been following this, being the pop culture Marvin that I am, but Jack Black is going to be starring as Uncle Jonathan in the new movie based on John Belair's book, The House with the Clock in Its Walls.
Really?
Yes. I don't know. And Kate Blanchett is going to be in that as well. I don't know how much you know about the author John Belair's, but he is one of the most underrated modern fantasy authors ever. His first book for adult, I mean, he made basically a name for himself writing kind of creepy children's books like The House with the Clock in Its Walls. Mm-hmm. There's a whole series with the same characters, Uncle Jonathan and his nephew Louis and so forth. So there's that whole series. But before he got into that, he did an adult fantasy that was one of the first examples of comedy fantasy that Terry Pratchett and people like that would later come into their own. Neil Gaiman and some others would come into their own. But he did a book called The Face in the Frost. That is, if you can find it, it's probably long since out of print, but it is one of the most brilliant stories of wizards and magic and everything that is also comedy. It will just have you in stitches. You'll be just laughing yourself, helpless reading this book. And there's also, I think, on a Facebook group dedicated just to the writing of John Belair's, because there's a little fandom there, of which I'm a part, that just is totally devoted to this man. He is so off the wall and just really out there in terms of his humor, almost Monty Python-esque, but within the context of fantasy. And he was doing it back like in the late 60s, early 70s, way before anybody thought of doing comedy fantasy. And so I highly recommend John Belair's.
It's on Amazon, actually.
Awesome.
Have to check that out.
And the movie with Jack Black should be really amazing.
Yep. Well, yeah. It also, states the Face in the Clock, and
yes,
I'm posting a link to Face in the Frost in the chat.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Very cool.
And there we are. The Eyes of the Killer Robot. Huh. No, that's a different guy.
I didn't recognize that title.
Wow,
I didn't mention. I started out talking tonight, Travis, about how I felt so much more comfortable in doing this interview tonight or this show tonight, because you had taught me the protocol for doing it, which was one bottle of wine per hour, I think.
Yes,
you said.
That is true. This is true.
I have not been able to keep up with that, and in fact, I switched to mead instead of wine. But it probably shows by now too.
It does help. I do have to say, last week probably I had a little too much. It was a bad week, and this week I haven't had any. So I'm way behind on the quota for the show tonight, because literally I had just. Wendy, I think I texted you about 10:20 that I had my phone on charge. I had just gotten back. I've done running back and forth. I've been a chauffeur and a manager and a sales rep and everything else today. So, and I worked until like 1 a.m. Last night because
just
of the storm.
Having way too much fun.
Oh, I know. Yes, makes Jack a dull boy. I can tell you that.
Back to your book. Boy, just keep plugging that book, Travis.
I'm telling you. Not good. Not good at all. Oh.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the chat room, and Sam just said Tolkien is a god. And I totally agree with that.
and he is. He
Yes.
really
Yes.
was. He really was.
His stated purpose in creating Lord of the Rings and the whole legendarium behind it was to create a mythic system for England. You know, he was saying that the Norse had their legends, the Welsh had theirs, the Irish with it, but what about England? It's not quite the same as the Saxons, you know. So he wanted to create a mythology for England, and he came very, very well near doing it.
Yes, he did. Yes, he
Yes,
did.
he did indeed. Now, did the Eagles at the end, was that supposed to be the United States coming in at the end of World War II?
God, I hope not.
I thought they were sweeping them all off to Hotel California.
I love all the memes where it talks about the Eagles. That, you know, if the Eagles had just taken the ring and dropped it in Mount Doom, we, you know, 4-minute movie.
That's why I could never be a full-length fiction author.
And by the way,
the
as
point,
long as
the
we're
end.
talking, I think we may have mentioned this before, but as long as we're I know I've talked to other people about it, but as long as we're talking about the Jackson films, I am a firm believer that only the extended director's cuts of each of those movies is the canonical version of those movies.
Oh, definitely
They
agree.
are so much better.
Yes,
than
they are.
the theatrical releases.
Yes, they are. But then again, that's Hollywood and the marketing machine. Because going back to Stephen King and It, I just bought my daughter the first chapter of it, but I bought it on DVD. She's like, "Why didn't you buy the Blu-ray?" I said, "Because the second part's coming out in September, which means we'll have to go to the theater to see it, which means I'm going to be paying that, and then it'll come out on Blu-ray again about 6 months later and DVD." I said, "And then they'll package them together so that I have to buy both Chapter 1 and Chapter 2." I said, "You're getting
and then will come the director's cuts.
And then they'll come the director's
Yes.
cut. And then they'll package it with the 1990s miniseries and the new one." I said, "You're getting the DVD now."
The VHS tape.
And the yeah, exactly. And then later we'll get the other one.
All for the low
She's like,
price of 4 monthly installments of $9.99.99.
She's like,
And if you act now, there will begin soon knives. No.
They cut tin cans as easily as they cut a tomato. Yeah, I know. I've seen the commercial.
Thank you, Ron Popeil.
Right.
Well, I was quoting Bill Murray from Scrooged when he and the Ghost of Christmas Past are going. He's like, I've never liked a girl enough to give her 12 sharp knives before. I got her these great knives. Yeah, Ginsu knives. Yeah, they cut a tin can as easily as they cut a tomato. Yeah. Yeah, I've never liked anybody enough to give them 12 sharp knives. I don't care, male or female. I'm not giving anybody 12 sharp knives. No, screw that. Get your own sharp knives.
One of the great Christmas movies.
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, it was funny. One of my employees came in, and we for the first time, I've been in this office for 2 damn years, and he noticed I have a cable outlet in my wall. He's like, "You could put a TV set in here." I said, "Oh, then I could be even more like Frank Cross." Do you really want me to be more like that?
Oh my God! And Carol Kay in that movie.
Yeah.
Oh my God, she was so brilliant.
Yeah,
She's always brilliant, but
she is. But I mean, in that it was perfect casting.
No kidding.
They played off of each other so well. If you touch me again, I'll rip your goddamn wings off.
Absolutely.
And then she slams him with the toaster. And he's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
the bitch hit me with a toaster."
Oh, well,
And
you can't forget her in The Princess Bride.
The Princess
where,
Bride.
"I'm not a witch, I'm your wife."
Yeah. And ironically, she looks better as the witch in The Princess Bride than she actually does in real life.
Oh.
Oh, but she was also in low budget horror. She was in When a Stranger Calls, and When a Stranger Calls Back, the sequel. Hope we forget.
Calls coming from inside the house.
Yes, I know. That's a messed up movie. But yes, I love that movie. That is my go-to Christmas movie. I love that one.
I'd probably put National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation just slightly above that, but
just a little bit. Just that one, and then Scrooge, and then I'm a little. I get a little soft at Christmas time. I have Elf with Will Ferrell.
Soft. Oh, here we go, folks. Soft side of Travis. Well, my other favorite that's right up there is The Muppet Christmas Carol.
Oh my God, my kids love that one.
Yeah,
I adore that film. Not only because I think Michael Caine may be the best Scrooge ever.
He actually is.
He really is. Up until that time, it was Alistair Sim. Was that it in the old black and white version?
But honestly, I have to say, Albert Finney.
Oh yes,
in the musical Scrooge, he does an amazing job. Just because he transforms himself from a man in his 30s when that movie was made to being that aged Scrooge that you see, and then embracing. I mean, he's got some great lines in that one.
But if we're going to talk about music and talk about Scrooge, back to Muppet Christmas Carol, that is some of the best music Paul Williams has ever written. Just brilliant.
But do you understand? You just said the best music that Paul Williams has put together.
Yeah, I'm a huge Paul Williams fan. Back off, man.
But I was going to say, it is good until Michael Caine starts singing. And I mean, the man is a phenomenal actor. Do not get me.
Yeah, I have to give him. I'm sorry, I've got to get him props though. He's not a singer, but he was really a sport for doing that.
He was. Well, he's just amazing. I have seen. I mean, the man, the sense of humor that he has about himself and what he's willing to do. I mean, hell, he was in the Austin Powers movies, the third one, as Austin Powers' father. I mean, the man just he embraces his legacy as a British icon.
Yes, absolutely.
And I have to say, Muppet Christmas Carol is a good one.
Yes.
If we're showing our softer side, National Lampoon's.
I think Kermit was great in that one too.
Kermit's always great.
He is.
Yes, he's always great.
But he made a great Bob Cratchit, didn't he?
He did make a good Bob Cratchit. He really did. And Rizzo the Rat as Charles Dickens was pretty damn good.
Oh, yes.
Gonzo.
It was Gonzo.
Sorry. Yeah. Gonzo as Charles Dickens, and Rizzo the Rat just as the...
A blue furry Charles Dickens.
Yeah, blue furry Charles Dickens.
We're proving to everybody that we're totally mad in terms of movies.
Oh my God! I mean, that's all I do is watch movies. I mean,
Well,
again, another way in which I am very similar to Frank Cross. I
like Fred Claus. Okay, I thought that was a cute movie.
Okay, Fred Claus was actually. I love the self-help group when they're all sitting around, and it's Fred Claus and Frank Stallone and Bill Clinton's brother and all the siblings of veteran people. Yeah, I think.
And they don't believe in Santa Claus.
And they don't believe in Santa. But actually, in that one, also again, very unique casting. Paul Giamatti as Santa. Stroke of genius in casting.
Oh Lordy, yeah, yep.
Yes.
But again, like in Elf, casting Ed Asner as Santa. Who would have thought casting
Mr. Grant?
Yeah, Lou Grant as Santa would work, but it did. And then, of course, you've got Bob Newhart as Papa Elf, and that's just
great.
He was.
He made the movie for me.
What's actually funny is back in December, and I don't know if other states did. I don't know if it was a contractual thing, but the state of Kentucky had him as Papa Elf doing the state lottery ads.
Nice.
It was hilarious.
I'm not a big Will Ferrell fan, but I really thought he pulled that one off great. Just as I really liked him. Would you believe I'm going to segue back into Witchcraft?
You liked him.
I liked him in Bewitched. I'm sorry, I did. I thought he made a great. Well, I thought the whole rewrite idea in the way the Bewitched movie was done, and of course it had Nicole Kidman. So
well, you can't go wrong.
No, but
really
the way the way they handled that with their little homage to the original Bewitched series. Oh, they did a great job, and nobody liked that movie, but me and two other people, I think. I thought they did a brilliant job.
Well, I think nobody, Hollywood really finds itself walking, Axiom, the razor. They like doing remakes, and they do them all the time, and people go, well, we're tired of remakes. But if they ever try to do something unique with a remake, then people don't like it.
Right.
And they did that with Bewitched. They were going, okay, we're going to redo a TV series, but we're going to do it with a slightly different spin. Mm-hmm. And nobody liked it. Nobody appreciated it. Will Ferrell was in another. They did, Land of the Lost.
Right.
Okay, I'm sorry. Land of the Lost as a TV series was a piece of crap. Even growing up, I mean, it was. The movie was a piece of crap, but it was still funny to watch because Will Ferrell was hilarious in it. Yeah. The movies that I've seen Will Ferrell do that I actually like him in, I do like him in Elf. I do like him in Elf because I do think Elf was
great. Yeah,
Elf was great because they just let him be himself. I mean, they just let him have free reign. The other movie that I've seen Will Ferrell do that I love him in was The Campaign with Zach Galifianakis, where they play opposing political candidates.
Yeah.
And Will Ferrell was the Democrat, and Galifianakis was the Republican. And that movie is hilarious. I saw it in a private screening, and then now I own it on DVD. And it actually is I've actually encouraged my ex-wife to use it in teaching communication because I really do think it epitomizes political satire in this country at this point in time. It is probably
that makes sense.
It is probably the most. And this is an extremely bold statement for a sober man on a Wednesday night. It is probably the most. It is probably the most profound political movie, in all honesty, this side of The President's Men, because it deals with very, very real issues in politics, but it deals with them like a retard on bath salts.
You're forgetting Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
No, I love Mr. Smith Goes
which
to
one?
Washington.
Which
the
one?
original.
Jimmy
the original,
Stewart,
of course. Jimmy Stewart.
Okay, there you go. I love that one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, the original Wendy, it has to be Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah, of course it does.
Getting back to the idea of remaking 60s stuff, like TV series as a movie, to me, the all-time great example of how it can work well, Get Smart.
Yes,
Steve Carell in that role. It was phenomenal. Almost better than the original TV series.
It was.
Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. I thought, how can they ever pull this off as a movie? They not only pulled it off, they made it better.
They didn't miss it by that much.
No. You got it.
He was perfect in the casting. Everything about that movie worked.
Which also brings us back to him as Uncle Arthur in Bewitched.
That's true. Paul Lynde.
I keep going back to Witchcraft here. Nobody else does.
Well, I kind of did. I said we've fallen down the rabbit hole.
Oh, yes. I think we've fallen very deeply down by this time.
It's not a rabbit hole anymore. It's a gopher hole.
Journey to the center of the earth.
Yeah. But you got to do it like Paul Lynde. Journey to the center of the earth. with Paul Lynde.
But you have to do it as David Hemmings narrating the Rick Wakeman version. Your turn.
I got nothing. After that, I got nothing.
I
knew that would be a showstopper.
Yeah.
I'd say my levels of impersonation go from Elvis to Jimmy Stewart to Paul Lynde to that's pretty much it at that point. But being a DJ at that point, you kind of have to do those things. You have to be able to do certain impersonations. You have to be able to bring them in. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got at this point. I got nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm done.
Drops the mic.
All up to you, Wendy.
It drops the mic, walks off stage. got nothing. I'm just exhausted at this point. Oh.
Yes, Alexia in the chat room, I think, summed it up nicely with her latest statement.
Which is?
Was Brilligan the slavey toves to gyre and gimble in the wabe. I think that's where we are right now.
I don't know that one, like, at all.
Oh, Lewis Carroll.
Oh, okay, thank you. I only know bits and pieces, sorry.
I was going to say, geez, somebody misquoted something and Alexa ordered a $80 Batman doll for, Sarah Huckabee's kid again. Oh, come on, you all saw that, right? You saw Sarah Huckabee at the press briefing going off on Amazon because one of her kids kept saying Batman, 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 and Alexa finally sent them an $80 Batman doll.
I did see something about that.
Something. I don't remember what exactly.
It's a good. I'm just thinking it's a good. It was. I'm just thinking it's a good thing he wasn't saying, Miss Piggy, Miss Piggy, Miss Piggy. She would have gotten a life-size Miss Piggy doll. It's a my-size Miss Piggy. Oh wait, I'm sorry. That is Sarah Huckabee. She is a my-size Miss Piggy. I'm sorry. That was just wrong.
Stop that.
Saying.
Laughter is good for the soul. And
if you have one. If you have one. Yes. It is.
I have several.
Yeah, but you keep them in a jar.
Harder to find that way.
They're in canobic jars under your bed.
Yes. They only thought they were making up Horcruxes.
Exactly. Oh, we have next episode of Mystic Moon Cafe, Mike Nichols, heir of Slytherin.
Yes, I always wondered what the Sorting Hat would do with it.
Fantastic beasts and where to find them.
Okay,
under Mike's
if we're
bed.
on Harry Potter...
That's probably true, Travis. I haven't looked under my bed in a long time.
I know.
There are dust bunnies there that have, transmorphed into... I don't even want to think about it. And now Alexia is quoting Yeats in our chat room. That's amazing.
Slytherin. Now, Michael Caine should have been the replacement for a man called Horse as Dumbledore.
Say again?
In the movies, I love the books. The books were the best, but the movies, when Richard
Harris,
thank you, when he passed away and they passed on the gauntlet of Dumbledore to, I think it's Michael Gambon, but I'm not positive on that one. It should have been Michael Caine, period.
That's a good idea. I just got smacked down from Alexia, and she's absolutely right. I misspoke. She said, tisk, tisk, Mike, that was William Blake from The Tiger, which, as everybody knows, these beginning lines are, Tiger, tiger, burning bright, what has caused you to ignite?
Yes.
So there, Alexia.
I'm thinking that the Mentalist, one of his arch nemesis, used that Tiger, tiger, burning bright. Or maybe it was just Tiger, tiger. Anyway, meanwhile.
That wasn't original, by the way. There was a guy who... my version of Tiger, tiger that I just quoted was by a guy who wrote a book in the 60s that was called Shrinklets. And it basically was a book of classic poems that were boiled down to a reasonable size so that most people could understand them. And the one that I remember best was The Raven, and by Poe, and let's see if I can remember to quote it. Raven lurches in, perches over door. Poet's bleary query, where's Lenore? creepy bird knows one word: nevermore.
Ooh, I like it.
That's the entire Raven shrunk down to 4 or 5 lines.
It's perfect. And see, when you were doing the tiger thing, I was going to go, the wonderful thing about tigers is tigers are wonderful things. Their tops are made out of rubber. Their bottoms are made out of springs.
Can you do that as Paul Winchell?
Oh, my God. Or goddess, or...
So, we digress.
The goddess we need to invoke here is Trivia, who is the goddess of where 3 roads come together. Trivia.
Yes.
Ooh.
Yeah, you didn't know that, did you?
We did
not know that.
I think you're making that shit up.
No, that's absolutely a thing. Look it up.
Ooh, you got called out, Travis.
Challenge by Wikipedia. I get it. Okay.
Oh my God. You went there.
I don't know. Oh. Yep, I did. I'm not going to look it up. I'm just saying. I believe him. I'm going.
Gee, what else can I make him believe?
Tonight,
Ooh,
pretty
that
so
bridge?
gullible.
Yeah.
Tonight, pretty much anything. Tonight,
Yeah.
pretty much anything. He is a sponge. He's ready to hit the bed.
Alrighty then. I guess maybe we should start winding up this
Think?
convoluted episode. Yeah.
Somewhere.
I feel sorry for anybody who's listening to this podcast, as a replay. Oh my God.
They're like,
I
somewhere,
think they enjoy it, actually.
They do.
Love
They are
the,
gluttons
They
for
love the
punishment.
serious part, but they love the laughter as well.
They do. And somewhere
Good.
they know one of us is waving some kind of, white flag.
Freak flag?
Okay, well, that would be Mike, and I don't think he's waving it right now. But well, he's the one who's got the monsters under his bed. He does the dust bunny.
Monstrous dust bunnies, yes.
Monstrous dust.
No,
like,
that's Eric Asher. He has the dust bunny that's actually a dragon.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's like Donnie Darko on acid. It's like.
Oh, this is totally off topic.
There is nothing totally off topic.
Like I've never gone off topic here before. But did either one of you see it was a failed TV pilot that was a remake of The Munsters.
Yes, and that actually was really good.
Oh my God, it was great. Eddie Izzard was
Eddie
Grandpa.
Izzard is one of my favorite comedians.
And he
love
was
it.
Absolutely brilliant. It was called Mockingbird Lane.
Mockingbird Lane. And it was a very different take, but it was so expensive. It was like $13 million. But it cost them $13 million to do the pilot. And they're like, we can't do this.
I actually recorded that, and I've got a copy of it.
So did I. It was so good. I mean,
it was so good, and I'm like,
tried so many times to do the Munsters. I mean, they've tried and tried and tried, but this one was so damn good.
Totally.
It was because they all look in this one. They all look normal, not just. Shit, what was the niece in the original that was supposed to look normal? Marilyn. They all look normal. It was just they had this monstrous side to them.
Yes.
And Eddie Izzard as oh my God.
Oh man, did he chew up the scenery on that one?
And Portia de Rossi, oh my God, never sexier. Oh my God.
Yeah. And the special effects in that.
The special effects were
amazing.
Awesome. Sure.
Yeah.
Because the dragon. What was the dragon's name in the original series?
Don't know that one.
I don't.
Well, yes, you do. They would raise the staircase, and the dragon and Eddie would feed it. Oh, but in this one, it was invisible. They didn't show you the dragon.
Yeah.
Or the fire or anything.
It was just But yes, it was phenomenal, amazing. 2-hour NBC pilot, and then it was like, nope, never going to do anything with it again because it cost $13 million. If it's going to cost $13 million for a 13
show,
yeah, no, sorry.
But I'm sorry, that should have caught on. That really should have been a series. That was so brilliant.
Well, but that has happened over and over again. Do you remember back in the early '90s they redid Dark Shadows with
Dark Shadows? Yes,
amazing show. But network TV just wasn't ready for it.
Alexia says the dragon's name was Spot.
Yes,
that's right. Thank you, Alexia.
Alexia is better than Alexa. Thank you, Alexia.
She's one of these people who she's young enough that she shouldn't know any of this stuff, and she does.
Who the hell is she?
She's proud to say she's like a scribe. She's my student that I'm teaching. I'm outing you at this point, Alexia. Sorry about that, but yeah, I'm actually doing the one-to-one teaching of my Welsh traditionalist witchcraft to her. So I am her mentor at this point.
Well, obviously she's schooling you on some stuff too.
Yes, she is, and she's very, 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 very intelligent, and that's obviously what makes it all work. So
that works. It does.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Spot the dragon. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So very cool. Yeah. Awesome stuff. We got to have you back on.
Well, I would be delighted to be back on. What are we going to talk about next time?
I don't know, but I'll actually be on the next show. I promise.
He says that now.
My days are not my own. I'm an indentured servant.
We had to carry this entire show.
Want from me.
Wendy and I had to carry this entire show on our own before you got.
That's right. But you know what? Sure. We rocked it.
We did.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did.
And we stayed on topic, actually, at that point.
I'm seeing a pattern here.
So am I.
Kind of like the
trivia. It's the three of us.
I don't know. What do you call a dating club for unattached witches? What? This
Mystic
is from our
Moon
chat
Cafe.
room.
Okay. What do you call it? I don't know. Driving stick. I don't know. Driving stick. I don't know what.
Craft
singles. Oh my god. Okay. I think that's an exit line if ever I've heard one.
Was that Alexia or was that Samantha?
That was Sam.
I figured that had to be. Yep.
I've actually heard that before, and I totally forgot it.
It was a first for me, so there.
I just want you to know somewhere Elizabeth Montgomery is spinning in her grave.
As long as she's not twitching her nose at us.
She is.
All right, kids. Well... All right, Mike. How do people get
going out on that joke?
On that, we're gonna.
As Stan Freeberg would say, are we going out on that joke?
I don't think we've got a
let's
choice,
have something
Mike.
a little bit better. Yeah, no. Oh, Sam says you're welcome. I'll be here all week. What a fun and lovely group. Maybe we should be a coven.
Are there 13 of us? Do we have enough? I mean,
I'm sure there would be by the time. Open enrollment starts tomorrow.
we could become the Mystic Moon Coven. I mean, we could transition and rebrand.
Yes, and you have to know movie trivia in order to.
Yes, absolutely.
And obscure quotes from different music genres.
Yes, and literally obscure quotes from
The more obscure, the better.
Yeah, I know. We'll go out on this. Speaking of movies and books, I'm sorry. I've been stuck in a hotel room for the past week, and I've been watching Turner Classic Movies. Do you know that TCM has finally done what I thought they should have been doing for years? They've launched a wine club.
Oh, they
Really?
did that after
Yes.
Robert Osborne died, didn't they?
They did. It is the TCM Wine Club, and you can actually order wine, and they will send you the wine and the food and the movie pairing, so that you can actually have a meal with the wine, and they will suggest a movie to watch. It is the most amazing thing that I have seen. I mean, I do this all the time, but I mean, to actually be able to order it and have it sent to me, that's amazing.
Wow.
And there's a Dean Martin label, and there's a Marx Brothers label, and there's a.
I'd be up for the Marx Brothers label.
I'm more for the Dean kind of. I'm thinking the alcohol content is going to be a little bit higher on the Dino wine. The Dino Vino is going to be a little bit higher on the alcohol content. But yeah, it was amazing. I was watching this. And they also now have a film noir store where that you can buy fedoras and cufflinks and flasks and wine glasses. And I'm like, where was this 20 years ago when I was buying fedoras and cufflinks? And I was having to, to go down backstreet alleys in big cities and buy the stuff, or have gay men in Las Vegas ask me to make them an offer. That's a story in and of itself.
Which we don't want to hear.
I concur.
Well, fine. It's a funny story.
High fives, Wendy.
Yeah.
It's a funny story, but fine. I don't care.
We're just.
Oh. No, I'd gone to Vegas. I had nothing but French cuff dress shirts, and I was on a mission to find cufflinks. And I ended up in a store in the Bellagio, and there was a guy wearing John Lennon granny glasses. And when I asked how much the cufflinks were, he pulled the granny glasses down over his nose and looked at me and said, "For you, anything is negotiable."
Oh. Were you doing your Elvis imitation at the time?
No, I was going Aloha Las Vegas, not Viva. I was going Aloha. I'm leaving. I'm not saying hello. Although in Hawaii, Aloha is either. So, yeah, so it doesn't matter. So anyway, yeah, no, it was good times. Not so much. Yeah. Next week, who do we have next week? What's next week's?
We don't.
Oh, we don't. We're off? Good, okay. I need a break.
Well, some of you are always off. Yeah.
I am.
Nothing happening here next week at this point.
Yeah. Join us as we have radio silence.
I love
No. The best of Marcel Marceau, right?
Yeah. Right. Yes. We're enjoying the classic silent features.
Yes.
Oh. So. Wendy, take us out. What song are we playing?
I'm not. Hold on.
Why?
Writing. Shut up. Shut up. You always tell me to shut up. You shut up.
I never tell you to shut up. I tell you to shut up when you start cutting me off of everything.
Well, generally when you need to be. But, let's see.
Sure.
I'm looking for
Here, stick your tongue on this frozen fence post. There's a movie we didn't cover.
Oh, my God. I love that movie. You know what? And I didn't watch that this Christmas. I did not get to see that movie. I didn't. I know.
Oh, shameful.
I know it is. It really is. But there were a lot of Christmas movies. I didn't watch White Christmas, which is one of my favorites. I didn't watch It's a Wonderful Life. I actually didn't watch Scrooge this Christmas, in all honesty. I tried, and I just
do you know a movie called The Bishop's Wife with Cary Grant?
Oh, my God. That is the one that I did watch because Cary Grant. Cary Grant is my favorite.
He's brilliant in that, and the guy who plays the old scholar, Monty Woolley.
Monty Woolley. Oh my God. Oh my God. He is hilarious.
I think that was when I tried to show to Sam, but she fell asleep.
Oh my God, that movie! Everything in that movie works. David Niven. Cary Grant.
Yes. Loretta Young.
My favorite scene in that movie is so well choreographed, and it's in the Bishop's Den, once Cary Grant's angel appears, and he starts walking towards David Niven, and David Niven starts walking backwards, and it is literally, they are literally in motion with one another, backstepping. Every step that Cary Grant takes, David Niven takes one back, and they are in perfect timed motion. It is a phenomenal movie. I saw that years ago when I was a kid on the Disney Channel.
Awesome.
Saw it, fell in love with it, bought it on DVD. It is one of my all-time favorites.
It's one of my all-time favorites too.
The remake with
no.
The remake was okay. The Preacher's Wife,
but
okay.
It doesn't have the magic of that original.
What's her name?
There are some movies that just don't translate. They don't translate to a new time. The Bishop's Wife is one of them. It needs to be left where it was.
Yep.
And,
I agree.
And that movie, I did watch The Bishop's Wife several times.
I did too this year, actually.
Yeah, I did. But Cary Grant is one of those actors. Humphrey Bogart, Dean Martin, Cary Grant. Those are some of the actors that I actually love and kind of model myself after.
Cary Grant is so interesting in that movie because he's, on the one hand, he's an angel, but he's starting to fall in love.
He's starting to be human. He's starting to be
human, and he's like, I need to get out of here if this starts to happen.
Which makes you, from a different theological slant, go, is he an angel or is he a watcher? And if he's a watcher, is he about to become? Is there about to be a fallen? Is that about to take place? But he does bring it around. I mean, he does, and he does it so well. I love. Beautiful. It's like of all. I mean, I love Alfred Hitchcock movies. I love the Alfred Hitchcock movies that have Cary Grant in them. Notorious.
Yes.
Notorious, one of my favorite. North by Northwest, my all-time favorite. North by Northwest is probably number one. Tombstone is probably number two.
And let's go back to Monty Woolley. Have you ever seen The Man Who Came to Dinner?
Yes, I have.
All right.
Yes.
Brilliant movie.
It is. I mean, I love classic movies. I mean, I love them. My dad introduced me to them years ago, and I literally, when I'm here in the hotel room, I have the TV on TCM, and it just plays. I fall asleep to it. I mean, the other night I fell asleep to The Age of Innocence. That's you. No, I fell asleep to The Age of Innocence with Daniel Day-Lewis, Winona Ryder, and I'm going. I don't even like that movie. It was TCM, and I just it was the fact that it was TCM.
Right.
No, but yes, I fall asleep to The Exorcist on a regular basis. I'm sorry, the tubular bells put me to sleep. I don't know if that means, but I don't know what that means.
I don't know what that means.
Well, we may not want to delve into that one very far.
Tell me the guy who did Tubular Bells. The guy's name. I can't think of it.
I can look it up. I can't tell you off the top of my head.
Oldfield. Something Oldfield.
David Oldfield? David?
Michael?
Oh, Michael?
I don't know. Anyway, his sister, Sally Oldfield, did an album called, I'm spacing on this, Water Bearer. And it's one of the most brilliant albums and most overlooked albums of the time. It was done in the 1970s, and it has an entire song cycle on side one of the album called Songs of the Quenya, which is all based on Tolkien's work. Really? Sally Oldfield. Yeah, she's Michael Oldfield's sister. And she does most of the instruments and vocals on that herself. She's brilliant, and this is an album that is brilliant and way overlooked. Really too bad, because it's great. Anybody who's into Tolkien should check it out.
Sally Patricia Oldfield, born 1947, sister of composer Mike and Terry Oldfield, born in Dublin, Ireland.
Right.
Raised in Roman Catholic faith.
And Mike Oldfield has done a lot of stuff beyond tubular. I mean, he's known for Tubular Bells, but he's done things like Hairgist Ridge and a lot of other really amazing instrumental type, things that most people don't know about. He's really good.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And he's younger than she is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. His work blends progressive rock, folk, classical, electronic, ambient, new age music. His biggest commercial success, Tubular Bells, which launched Virgin Records. That actually, in and of itself, is quite the accomplishment, to launch Virgin Records.
Yes. If you want an example of Sally Oldfield's best work, go out to YouTube and look up something called Night of the Hunter's Moon, and you'll get a really good idea of what Sally Oldfield is all about. Okay. Really remarkable, especially for her time, at that time.
I will do it later, because I actually have discovered that YouTube has become my new favorite friend late at night. Because, shut up, Wendy.
Talk about a rabbit hole.
I know.
Oh, no, yeah, indeed.
There are so many of the 1970s made-for-TV horror films that are on YouTube. I have enjoyed Gargoyles. The horror, the horror at 37,000 feet. These are all movies I had seen before, but I had seen them on broadcast TV, and you can't buy them. I mean, I've been unable to find them on DVD.
You know, both of the Dark Shadows theatrical releases, House of Dark Shadows and Night of Dark Shadows, are both on YouTube. Yes.
So I have watched the horror. Jonathan Fritt, yes. The horror at 37,000 feet, Gargoyles. What was the other one I watched the other night? I have done Overlords of the UFOs, Charles Berlitz's The Bermuda Triangle. I have done I found all these. I'm like, oh my God, these are the things I used to stay up and watch as a teenager on TBS or TNT or one of the early offshoots of cable TV. And now I have them right here, and it's awesome. It's great. So I've been falling asleep to those.
Cool. I don't know, Samantha. How many Sumerians does it take to change a light bulb?
Only one. The Good Samaritan.
We're looking at the chat room, folks, and I have a bunch of light bulb jokes that are actually witchcraft oriented. I'll have to tell you something.
Imagine that.
Are they illuminating?
Oh!
Okay, the answer is 13, 1 to hold the bulb, and 12 to drink enough to make the room spin. I've heard that before. In various contexts. How many Gardnerians does it take to change a light bulb?
I don't know, Mike. How many does it take?
I can't tell you. That's a third-degree secret. How many Alexandrians does it take to change a light bulb?
No clue.
You'll have to ask a Gardnerian. How many feminist witches does it take to change a light bulb?
None. They make a man do it.
Nope.
No, damn. Sorry.
The answer is that's not funny. How many traditionalists, this gets to my end of the thing, how many traditionalist witches does it take to change a light bulb?
No clue.
13, 1 to change the light bulb, and 12 to lament the passing of the old bulb.
Fair enough.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay. Yeah, I published, when I had my store, The Magick Lantern, we published a newsletter called The Lantern's Light, and in one edition we had, I don't know, there must have been 20 different witchcraft-oriented light bulb jokes. And, everyone through all these different traditions. It was great.
Now, can we find those publications anywhere, like online or?
It's been my my intention for many years. excuse me, to actually scan those in, because it's, I think, in terms of Kansas City pagan newsletters, it was second only to one called The Room. And we did it for quite a few years, as long as I had the store. My store was called the Magick Lantern, and it was, the logo for the store was the hermit from the tarot cards, holding up his lantern, of course. And so naturally our newsletter was called The Lantern's Light. And, okay, what do you call 13 witches in a hot tub, Sam? We'll wait for this. A self-cleaning coven. Oh, dear.
I like my toil, boil, and bubble better.
Oh, that was
Nothing says loving like something from the coven.
all right. Nothing says loving like a self-cleaning coven. Then we don't have to worry about anything.
You can do anything thou wilt at Alistair's restaurant. Okay.
Yeah,
hey,
meanwhile,
Mr.
back at the ranch.
Hey, Mr. Crowley, man, tell me Kabbalah.
Okay, that's funny.
Mike, you're looking into your Lowenbrow so deeply. What are you doing? I'm scrying in my beer. Shall I stop now? Yes, I'll be here all week, too.
Yeah, on that note.
You want to take us out of here?
Find us a song, Wendy, for God's sake. Find us a song.
Well, Mike provided Lady in Black by Uriah Heep, and I believe there's a story behind that.
Yeah, actually, this is a song that I have done. It was really, Uriah Heep was one of my favorite groups in the early 70s, and probably second only to Deep Purple. I loved the writing of Ken Hensley, who was their major composer and their keyboardist, who was deeply influenced by J.R.R. Tolkien. He, of course, did albums like The Magician's Birthday and things like this. But this was from one of their earlier albums before they got really popular. This is Lady in Black, and it's a song that I used to do. I did a kind of a very slowed down folk version on guitar, just acoustic guitar with just me playing it. But this is the actual track that I sent Wendy that is by Uriah Heep, and it's very redolent of an invocation of the goddess. It's a beautiful song. I've always loved it.
All right, and I will take us out with that. Mike, thank you so very much, and we'll work out another time for you to be on.
Okay, great. I've had a great time. Thank you for asking me.
Absolutely. Travis, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for letting me. Thank you for making me. So, you guys have a great week.
Lady in Black. Thanks, you all.
She came to me one morning, one lonely Sunday morning, her long hair flowing in the midwinter wind. I know not how she found me, for in darkness I was walking, and destruction lay around me from a fight I could not win. 'cause having spoke, she turned away. And though I found no words to say, I stood and watched until I saw her black cloak disappear. My labor is no easier, but now I know I'm not alone. I find you hard each time I think upon that windy day. And if one day she comes to you, drink deeply from her words so wise, take courage from her at your prize and say hello for me.
Thank you for joining us tonight. You've been listening to Mystic Moon Cafe. Join us every Wednesday from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. On behalf of Wendy Schindler, this is Travis Short saying have a great rest of your week.
That's all, folks.